Hello everyone and welcome back to the Unexplained Diaries. Here on this channel I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. I wasn't supposed to be there. Not really. The fence was old, rusty, and topped with those warning signs that you usually just glance at and ignore, but I knew it was off limits. The security cameras, the patrols, they were real enough. Still, it was a perfect spot for stargazing, far enough out of town where the sky opened up and the light pollution from Silver Springs didn't blot out the stars. My name's Ely, and I was 16 at the time. I didn't have much else going on that summer night except a flashlight, a blanket, and this intense need to see something different. I'd heard rumors about the zone, calls from the older kids about strange lights, weird noises. They said the government kept stuff there, experimental or secret or whatever. Me, I just wanted to watch the stars in peace, maybe catch a meteor shower if I was lucky. So I slipped through a break in the fence around 11 p.m., careful not to trip on the wire or make noise that would set off alarms. The air was cooler than I expected for July, dry and carrying the smell of sage and dirt. My dog, a scrappy mutt named Patch, trailed behind me, his nails clicking softly on the gravel. I found a spot by an old dirt road, away from the nearest cluster of lights. Laid out my blanket and sat down, leaning back to stare up. The Milky Way stretched overhead in thick, milky streaks. The moon was just a thin crescent, barely bright enough to dim the stars. Patch curled up beside me, his tail twitching in his sleep. At first, everything felt normal. I caught a few shooting stars, blinked hard trying to hold on to the peaceful quiet, but then I noticed something strange near the horizon to the northeast. A group of lights, small but bright, hovering together in a formation that looked too neat to be planes or helicopters. They stayed perfectly still, almost like they were waiting. I squinted, tried to see if they were blinking or moving, but nothing, no sound either. The air was still except for the soft rustling of the brush. After a few minutes, the lights shifted. Not slowly, like something floating in the wind. They split apart in a way that didn't seem possible. They separated in perfect unison, each light moving on a different path but staying synchronized, like dancers in a routine. And then just as quickly, they reformed back into the original pattern. No gaps, no mistakes, perfectly timed. I blinked and checked my eyes, sure I was imagining it. Patch stirred, lifted his head, and growled softly, looking up. I whispered to him to calm down, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. The whole thing repeated a few times, the lights breaking apart and snapping back together faster than anything mechanical I'd ever seen. Each time, they made patterns that seemed deliberate, almost geometric, lines, triangles, clusters that morphed fluidly. It was mesmerizing, but also a little unsettling. I kept waiting for some kind of sound or disturbance, but nothing. No engines, no hum, no blinking aircraft lights, just these smooth, bright orbs moving perfectly in sync, like a single organism with multiple parts. I fumbled for my phone, but of course, no signal out here. I tried to take a picture, but the light was too faint to show up clearly, and the camera couldn't catch the quick movements anyway. It felt like I was watching something that was meant to be seen with the naked eye only. After a while, the formation suddenly scattered in all directions, vanishing behind the hills faster than I thought was physically possible. The sky went completely dark in that area, like someone switched off a string of lights all at once. Patch jumped up, barking sharply, ears pinned back. I stood up, flashlight in hand, scanning the hills and brush. Nothing moved. No other lights, no signs of people or vehicles. The only sound was Patch's breathing and the distant call of an owl. I wanted to leave then. I really did. But as I turned to pack up, I noticed something else. Small patches of the dirt near my blanket looked disturbed, like something heavy had pressed down on it. But there were no footprints or tire tracks, just these weird circular depressions that weren't there when I arrived. Patch sniffed around them, growled low, and backed up against me. I didn't understand it. The ground was soft from a recent rain, so anything heavy would leave a mark, but there was nothing else, no signs of anything or anyone. I started walking back toward the fence, my heart pounding, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. The sky was still clear, the stars bright, but the quiet felt too heavy, like the whole desert was holding its breath. I got out through the gap and ran back to the truck, feeling the cold sweat on my neck. Patch climbed in without being told, shaking himself off and looking at me like he wanted to get as far away as possible. The next morning, I went back with my dad, hoping to find some explanation. The circular marks were still there in the dirt, but the weird part was they didn't match anything familiar. No animal tracks, no tire impressions, just these shallow, smooth depressions, perfectly round. We took pictures and measured them. They were bigger than a man's hand, but smaller than a tire. My dad Joe joked maybe it was some kind of animal digging, but neither of us could figure out what. I haven't gone back since. Sometimes I look up at the sky from my bedroom window and wonder if those lights are still out there, doing whatever it was I saw. Patch won't go near the edge of town after dark now. He stays close, like he remembers something too. I don't know what I saw that night. It wasn't drones or planes or satellites. It didn't make sense, but it was real. And that silence, the way the grass and dirt acted, the perfect patterns in the sky, something about it felt way beyond anything I'm used to. The storm came out of nowhere, like it had been waiting until the last second to remind us who was really in charge around here. It was late summer, early September, and the kind of heavy rain that slams the windows and shakes the trees. I was home with my family, my wife Claire, our daughter Lila, and our golden retriever Hobbs. We live on the edge of Pine Ridge, which is just a few miles outside of the city but surrounded by thick woods. It's quiet out here, mostly dark after sundown, and storms can get really intense with how the wind funnels through the trees. The power cut out maybe 20 minutes after the first thunder hit. It was the kind of blackout that felt like the whole neighborhood just blinked out at once. 1 second, the lights were on, the TV was playing some stupid cooking show, and the next, everything went black, except for the flash of lightning outside. Claire lit some candles, and we gathered in the living room. Hobbs immediately laid down next to Lila, who was clutching her favorite stuffed bear. She was maybe 7 at the time, scared of the thunder like most kids. I sat by the window watching the rain hammer down on the yard. The wind made the old pines groan and bend low. At some point, the power kicked back on. It wasn't gradual, just a quick snap, and the lights flickered back to life. We all sighed, relieved, but then Claire said something that made me freeze. "Did you see the security cameras?" I hadn't thought to check. We'd set up a basic home security system a few months before, mostly because we live so close to the woods and sometimes deer or raccoons come close enough to set off the motion detectors. The footage is stored on a little DVR box in the laundry room. When I went to check it, I found the video files from the blackout period were all scrambled, just static and glitchy colors like the signal was broken or corrupted. But there was one frame, just one, frozen in the middle of all the noise. It was weird. Grainy infrared footage that showed the edge of the tree line behind our backyard. And there, just standing in the shadows, was a silhouette. I couldn't make out much. It wasn't a person in any clear sense. It was tall, maybe 6 feet, but the shape was a little off. Slim, but somehow not quite human. The strangest part was the eyes. 2 bright points of light reflecting back, like you see in a dog or a cat at night. But these eyes were still, just staring back from the dark edge of the trees. I watched that frame over and over, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. The rest of the video was unusable, like the system had been jammed or overwhelmed somehow. That night, I kept checking the backyard through the window, but all I could see were the usual shadows cast by the storm-battered trees. Hobbs growled low once or twice, but didn't rush to the door or try to go outside. Claire was quiet, not her usual chatter. Lila just hugged her bear and eventually fell asleep. The next day, we went out to check the yard. The rain had washed away any tracks, and nothing seemed out of place. No broken branches, no disturbed grass, no footprints leading to or from the tree line. It was like nothing had been there at all. I asked some neighbors if they'd noticed anything strange during the storm, but everyone was mostly just talking about the weather and the power outage. No one mentioned lights or noises or anything weird. It felt like I was the only one who saw something. I kept thinking about that single frame. What was it? A person with some kind of night vision gear? An animal? Something else? The eyes reflected light in a way that didn't match any animal I know around here. No deer, no coyote, no raccoon. And the shape wasn't right either. A few nights later, I stayed up late again, scanning the yard with a flashlight and watching the tree line. Hobbs was restless, pacing near the door. I thought I caught a flicker of movement just at the edge of the woods, but when I shone the light, nothing was there. The weirdest part was the silence. Usually at night, the forest is full of sounds. Crickets, frogs, the wind through the leaves. But that night, it was dead quiet, like the world held its breath. I don't know why we didn't call the cops or anyone else. Maybe because there was no proof, just a weird image on a camera no one else could see. Maybe because I didn't want to believe it was something that didn't have a simple explanation. Claire suggested maybe it was just some glitch, something caused by the storm messing with the cameras. But the way the eyes looked, like they were watching us, made me uneasy. Eventually, things went back to normal. The power stayed on, the cameras worked again. Hobbs stopped growling at night, but sometimes when the wind is right and the trees grown low outside, I find myself staring at the dark edge of the yard, wondering if whatever was there that night is still watching. I was out in the Mojave Desert just outside of Joshua Tree, setting up for what was supposed to be a straightforward overnight time-lapse shoot. I'd been chasing shots like this for years, the kind where the Milky Way stretches across the sky, all clear and brilliant, with nothing but the desert around you. It was early September. The nights were just starting to cool down a bit after the summer heat, and the air was dry and still. I arrived just before sunset, hauling my gear. A tripod, a Canon 5D, a handful of lenses, and a portable power bank. My dog, Jasper, a lean Australian shepherd with sharp amber eyes, came along. I like taking him because he's calm at night, and it's nice not to be alone. We set up on a little ridge about half a mile from the nearest dirt road. The spot had a good view of the horizon and the dark sky, away from any light pollution. After a quick check, I positioned the camera to face north-northwest, where the stars would begin to move across the frame. I programmed the time-lapse to take a shot every 30 seconds, set the ISO and aperture, and let it run through the night. Jasper settled down near my camp chair with a blanket. I brought some water and snacks and figured I'd hang out, maybe get a little sleep, but mostly just watch the sky and listen to the desert. The night was quiet, way quieter than I expected. No wind, no distant trucks or planes. Jasper's ears perked up a few times, but he stayed lying down. I thought that was just the desert being desert. Around 1:30 a.m., I decided to check on the camera. The lens was cold to the touch, no dew, which was a relief. I double-checked the battery level. It was fine. While I was doing that, I noticed a faint dot of light on the horizon, just above the ridgeline, maybe a mile away. At first, I thought it was a car or some distant camper, but it was too small, like a pinpoint, almost like a star at first glance. The dot didn't move like a car, it shifted, but in a weird way. I focused my binoculars on it, and that's when it got strange. The light moved in sharp, deliberate patterns. Not smooth like a plane or a helicopter, but jerky and geometric. It traced triangles, then squares, then lines straight up and down. It was like watching a light show in slow motion. I blinked a few times, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks. Jasper suddenly stood up, ears forward, and started growling low and quietly. I looked around, but there was nothing else, just the black desert and stars. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking toward the ridge where the light was. The farther I went, the less I could hear the usual desert noises. No crickets, no rustling of bushes, not even the breeze that usually rustles the dry scrub. The silence was thick, almost like it was absorbing sound. The light kept moving, but it seemed to slow down, tracing the same shapes again and again. When I got to the top of the ridge, I could see it clearer. It wasn't bright like a flashlight or campfire. It was a cool white light, almost too steady. No blinking, no warmth. I waved the flashlight at it, thinking maybe it was some kind of prank or a drone. but the light didn't react. Then it started moving again, this time faster, zigzagging in patterns I couldn't follow easily. Then it just disappeared. Gone, like someone switched it off. I stood there for a few minutes, heart pounding, staring into the darkness. Jasper whimpered softly beside me. The desert noise returned slowly, the wind picking up, a distant coyote yipping. I walked back to my setup, still feeling off. When I got to the camera, I powered it off and checked the time-lapse photos. The early shots showed the usual star trails, the Milky Way glowing over the desert. But around 1:30 a.m., there it was, the pinpoint of light I'd seen. It appears on frame 114, tracing perfect geometric shapes across the horizon. Then it just vanishes between frames 134 and 135. The shapes are so precise they look almost computer-generated. I zoomed in as much as I could, but the image was grainy at that distance. Still, the movement was clear. No blinking, no flashing, just steady, deliberate movement in patterns that didn't match anything natural. I scrolled through the rest of the images, but it never came back. Jasper refused to lie down after that. He stayed close, pacing and staring into the dark like he was waiting for something. I packed up as dawn approached, the sky starting to glow pale pink and orange behind the distant mountains. On the drive back, I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that light again. It never showed. Back home, I ran through the footage multiple times over the next few days. I showed it to a couple of friends who were into astronomy and photography, but no one had a good explanation. Satellites don't move like that. Drones don't follow such precise geometric patterns for that long and then just disappear. The whole thing left me feeling uneasy. It wasn't like a flash or a quick spark in the sky. It moved like it was alive, or maybe programmed, but it felt out of place, like something not meant to be there. I tried to ignore it, but every night since, Jasper has been restless. He stares at the windows or door, ears twitching like he's hearing something I can't. I've started checking the sky more often, hoping to catch that light again, but it hasn't come back. I still don't know what it was, but I know what I saw. I was out in the Mojave Desert, just outside of Joshua Tree, setting up for what was supposed to be a straightforward overnight time-lapse shoot. I'd been chasing shots like this for years, the kind where the Milky Way stretches across the sky, all clear and brilliant, with nothing but the desert around you. It was early September. The nights were just starting to cool down a bit after the summer heat, and the air was dry and still. I arrived just before sunset, hauling my gear. A tripod, a Canon 5D, a handful of lenses, and a portable power bank. My dog, Jasper, a lean Australian shepherd with sharp amber eyes, came along. I like taking him because he's calm at night, and it's nice not to be alone. We set up on a little ridge about half a mile from the nearest dirt road. The spot had a good view of the horizon and the dark sky, away from any light pollution. After a quick check, I positioned the camera to face north-northwest, where the stars would begin to move across the frame. I programmed the time-lapse to take a shot every 30 seconds, set the ISO and aperture, and let it run through the night. Jasper settled down near my camp chair with a blanket. I brought some water and snacks and figured I'd hang out, maybe get a little sleep, but mostly just watch the sky and listen to the desert. The night was quiet, way quieter than I expected. No wind, no distant trucks or planes. Jasper's ears perked up a few times, but he stayed lying down. I thought that was just the desert being desert. Around 1:30 a.m., I decided to check on the camera. The lens was cold to the touch, no dew, which was a relief. I double-checked the battery level. It was fine. While I was doing that, I noticed a faint dot of light on the horizon, just above the ridgeline, maybe a mile away. At first, I thought it was a car or some distant camper, but it was too small, like a pinpoint, almost like a star at first glance. The dot didn't move like a car, it shifted, but in a weird way. I focused my binoculars on it, and that's when it got strange. The light moved in sharp, deliberate patterns. Not smooth like a plane or a helicopter, but jerky and geometric. It traced triangles, then squares, then lines straight up and down. It was like watching a light show in slow motion. I blinked a few times, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks. Jasper suddenly stood up, ears forward, and started growling low and quietly. I looked around, but there was nothing else, just the black desert and stars. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking toward the ridge where the light was. The farther I went, the less I could hear the usual desert noises. No crickets, no rustling of bushes, not even the breeze that usually rustles the dry scrub. The silence was thick, almost like it was absorbing sound. The light kept moving, but it seemed to slow down, tracing the same shapes again and again. When I got to the top of the ridge, I could see it clearer. It wasn't bright like a flashlight or campfire. It was a cool white light, almost too steady. No blinking, no warmth. I waved the flashlight at it, thinking maybe it was some kind of prank or a drone, but the light didn't react. Then it started moving again, this time faster, zigzagging in patterns I couldn't follow easily. Then it just disappeared. Gone, like someone switched it off. I stood there for a few minutes, heart pounding, staring into the darkness. Jasper whimpered softly beside me. The desert noise returned slowly, the wind picking up, a distant coyote yipping. I walked back to my setup, still feeling off. When I got to the camera, I powered it off and checked the time-lapse photos. The early shots showed the usual star trails, the Milky Way glowing over the desert. But around 1:30 a.m., there it was, the pinpoint of light I'd seen. It appears on frame 114, tracing perfect geometric shapes across the horizon. Then it just vanishes between frames 134 and 135. The shapes are so precise they look almost computer-generated. I zoomed in as much as I could, but the image was grainy at that distance. Still, the movement was clear. No blinking, no flashing, just steady, deliberate movement in patterns that didn't match anything natural. I scrolled through the rest of the images, but it never came back. Jasper refused to lie down after that. He stayed close, pacing and staring into the dark like he was waiting for something. I packed up as dawn approached, the sky starting to glow pale pink and orange behind the distant mountains. On the drive back, I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that light again. It never showed. Back home, I ran through the footage multiple times over the next few days. I showed it to a couple of friends who were into astronomy and photography, but no one had a good explanation. Satellites don't move like that. Drones don't follow such precise geometric patterns for that long and then just disappear. The whole thing left me feeling uneasy. It wasn't like a flash or a quick spark in the sky. It moved like it was alive, or maybe programmed, but it felt out of place, like something not meant to be there. I tried to ignore it, but every night since, Jasper has been restless. He stares at the windows or door, ears twitching like he's hearing something I can't. I've started checking the sky more often, hoping to catch that light again, but it hasn't come back. I still don't know what it was, but I know what I saw. I was walking Barley like I always do around 11:30, just before bed. He's a wire-haired pointer mix, kind of scrappy looking but sweet. We live in a neighborhood just outside Spokane, one of those places where the houses start to get spaced out, and you can actually see the stars if it's clear out. That night was cold and still. October. No wind, no moon. I remember that because I could hear everything. Crickets, a train way off in the distance, even the clicking of Barley's nails on the pavement. We were halfway through our usual loop, about 3 blocks from home. Same route I've taken 100 times. We were cutting through the side street that curves around behind a line of older ranch houses. There's no streetlights back there, just porch lights and some soft glow from windows. Barley was sniffing like crazy along one of the fences, tugging the leash like he usually does when he finds some rabbit scent. Then he stopped. Not a slow stop, like a planted, full-body halt. His front legs stiffened, head snapped up, tail down. I gave the leash a little tug and said his name, but he didn't move, just stared straight up. I looked up too, thinking maybe an owl or something, but there was nothing. Just the dark sky and a handful of stars. He started whining. Low at first, then this weird high-pitched sound I'd never heard from him before. He wasn't looking around, just locked on to this one spot above us. I stood there with him maybe 10 seconds, feeling stupid, scanning the sky for anything. I even said out loud, "What are you looking at?" And then the crickets stopped. That's what made me nervous. I didn't notice it right away, but once I did, it was like my ears were suddenly underwater. No bugs, no distant train, no wind. Just me and Barley in this dead quiet patch of street under a sky that suddenly felt way too big. He started backing up slowly, still looking up, still whining, moving his paws like he was walking on ice. I crouched down to check his eyes, thinking maybe something had gotten in them, but he wouldn't even glance at me. It was like he couldn't break focus from that one spot above us. I followed his gaze again. Still nothing. But standing there, I don't know. It was like the air was thick. Not cold exactly, but heavy. The way it gets before a thunderstorm. I kept waiting for something to move up there. For a plane to pass, or even a bird. But the sky stayed empty, and Barley wouldn't stop whining. I finally picked him up. He weighs close to 60 pounds, so it wasn't easy. But I got him in my arms and started walking back the way we came. Every few steps I'd glance up, and every time I'd feel this tightness in my chest, like I was missing something obvious. About a block from the house, Barley twisted and wriggled until I set him down. He bolted ahead, pulling at the leash so hard I had to jog to keep up. He didn't even stop at the yard to pee like usual, just ran straight up to the door, tail low, pacing in a circle while I fumbled with the keys. Inside, he wouldn't leave the kitchen, wouldn't even go near the sliding glass door in the living room. I left the TV on that night and slept with the hallway light, which I hadn't done since I was a kid. Next morning, everything seemed fine. Barley was normal, ate his breakfast, wagged when I grabbed the leash, so I figured maybe he smelled something weird, or maybe a bat was flying overhead and I just didn't see it. That night, I avoided the side street and took the longer route by the school. He was fine. No weird stops, no whining. Same thing the next night. I kind of forgot about it. Until Friday. We were passing the same stretch. Not the same night, not the same time, but close enough. I had my headphones in, just one earbud, so I could still hear Barley if he barked. He was trotting a little ahead of me, ears up, tongue out. Normal. Then he stopped again. Different from before, though. This time he turned and looked behind us. I paused the music and followed his gaze. Nothing. Street was empty, houses all dark. I turned in a full circle, but we were completely alone. I took a step, but Barley didn't move. Then the porch light on the house next to us flickered. Not on and off, it flickered like it was struggling to stay on. The bulb buzzed audibly, this faint, high-pitched whine that didn't sound right. I looked up at it, and for a second I thought I saw a shadow move across the light, like something passed in front of it. But there was nothing there. No branches, no bugs, nothing. Barley growled. Not loud, but low and deep. That's when I heard this faint clicking sound, like someone lightly tapping metal together. I thought it was coming from the porch, but it echoed weirdly, like it was above us. I stepped back into the street and looked up. Still nothing. But then the light went out completely, and I swear I felt something shift in the air. Like pressure, not wind, just movement. Like something had passed overhead too fast to see, but slow enough to feel. Barley bolted. This time I didn't pick him up. I just ran with him, leash taut, neither of us looking back. My legs felt weirdly light, like I was running downhill even though the street's flat. The sound didn't follow us. It stopped completely once we turned the corner. Like crossing that intersection cut something off. Back home, Barley went under the table and wouldn't come out. I kept checking the windows like I was expecting someone to be out there. Next day, I walked the street again, in daylight. Looked for anything. Security cams, bird nests, even weird wiring. Nothing. I even checked that porch light. It was back on. Steady glow, no flicker. I didn't knock or anything, just stood on the sidewalk like an idiot, trying to listen. Later that week, I got curious and checked the weather data for that night. No storms, no unusual cloud cover. Clear sky, no wind, no seismic activity either. I looked that up too. I haven't walked that route since. I drive Barley to a park now, even though it's way out of the way. He hasn't acted weird since. But sometimes at night, when I take the trash out or grab something from the car, I get this feeling like something's above me. I look up. Nothing. Just stars. But sometimes it feels like one of them isn't where it should be. It was around 3:10 in the morning when I stepped out for a smoke. I was halfway through a double shift at the old Falcon Ridge Distribution Center. It's a warehouse out on the edge of Carson City, about a mile from the highway. The place mostly deals with auto parts now, but it used to store HVAC equipment or something, so it's huge, way bigger than it needs to be. Nobody's there at night except me. The air was cool, not cold. Dry like it always is in late September. No wind, not even a breeze. Just that silent kind of stillness you get when everything's gone to sleep. Even the trucks on the highway were rare that night. I hadn't heard one in at least 20 minutes. I lit up and leaned against the loading dock railing, watching the sky. Clear night, tons of stars. You can really see them out there, away from the town lights. It's one of the few things I like about the job. So I'm standing there, not thinking about anything, just staring up, and something shifts. It was subtle at first. I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks. You know how you can stare at the stars too long and start to see movement? But this wasn't like that. There was this one patch of sky right over the west end of the building where the stars didn't look quite right. Like, some of them were missing. I stepped off the dock and walked out a bit to get a better view. That's when I saw it. There was a shape, not glowing or anything, just this void against the sky, almost like something was blocking the stars. No lights, no sound. At first I thought it was a cloud, but the rest of the sky was crystal clear and this thing didn't move like a cloud. It was solid, or at least it looked solid. It was hard to tell the shape exactly, but it wasn't round. More like a stretched out oval, kind of flattened. Big, like the size of the warehouse roof, maybe bigger. And it was low. Not low enough to touch the building, but low enough I could tell it was there by how the air felt. I know how that sounds, but I mean it. The ground had this buzz to it. Not shaking, not like an earthquake, but more like a faint hum that you could feel in your legs. Like when you stand too close to a big transformer box. No actual sound, though. That's what got me. It was completely silent. I stood there maybe 20 seconds before backing up slowly toward the side door. I didn't take my eyes off it. I kept thinking it would make some kind of move, a flash, a sound, anything, but it just hovered. I made it back inside and locked the door behind me. Not sure why. It's not like a deadbolt would do much if something was floating up there, but it made me feel a little better. Inside, the lights felt too bright. I turned off the overheads in the break room and peeked through the side window. You can't see much from there, just the gravel lot and the edge of the loading dock. But I could still make out the dark patch in the sky, right above where I'd been standing. It stayed like that for maybe 5 minutes. Then the lights in the main bay flickered. They didn't go out, just flickered hard, like they were struggling to stay on. I thought maybe the power grid was acting up, but the break room lights were fine. The coffee machine didn't blink either. That's when I noticed something else. The little portable radio I keep on my desk, it had gone dead. Batteries were fine, I just changed them the day before, but it was completely silent, not even static. I walked into the bay, slow. The air in there felt heavy, like it does before a thunderstorm. Still that same hum in my legs, stronger now. Not painful, just present. I stood by the open dock door and looked up again. Gone. Just like that, it wasn't there anymore. The stars were back where they should have been. No shape, no shadow. The buzzing stopped. Radio came back on, playing some late-night country DJ like nothing had happened. I stood there a long time. I didn't feel safe going back out. I don't even remember finishing my smoke. Just stood there holding it like an idiot. The weird part, and this might have been nothing, I don't know, is that when I checked the security cams, all 4 outdoor feeds had glitched at the same time. Exactly 3:11 a.m. It's not like a full blackout, more like the video froze for about 12 seconds. No static, no cutoff, just paused frames. After that, it picked back up like normal, only the outdoor ones. Inside feeds were fine. I printed the log sheets, circled the time, but didn't write anything else down. Didn't really know how to explain it. Next night, same shift, I brought my dog Marnie with me. She's a shepherd mix, real calm, doesn't bark much. I figured she'd keep me company. She did fine until we got close to the warehouse. Started whining in the truck before I even cut the engine. Tail down, head low, didn't want to get out. I had to carry her inside, and she's not a small dog. Once we were in the building, she wouldn't leave the office area. Kept her ears pinned back, pacing in circles by the desk, nose tilted up like she smelled something. I tried to take her out around 2:30 for a bathroom break. She flat out refused. Legs locked, full body shake. I've had her 6 years and I've never seen her act like that. I stayed inside the rest of the night. Around 3, I felt the hum again. Faint. Not as strong as the night before, but didn't go look. I don't think I could have made myself open the door even if I'd wanted to. I worked 2 more shifts after that, but nothing happened. No buzz, no missing stars, no glitches. Marnie still refused to get out of the truck when I brought her. On the 3rd night, she actually growled at the building when we pulled up. I started bringing a thermos of coffee instead of using the machine there. I unplugged the radio. 1 week later, I swapped shifts with a guy named Ruben. Told him I needed to help my brother with some early deliveries. Truth is, I just didn't want to be there past midnight anymore. Didn't tell Ruben why, just said I was getting burned out. The security manager, Mr. Colburn, asked me about the glitch logs. I shrugged, said maybe the cameras hiccuped during an update. He nodded like that made sense. I don't think he looked too hard. I still work there, just during the day now. No interest in going back on nights. Sometimes, when I take the back road home, the one that passes behind the ridge where the warehouse sits, I glance up at the sky. I don't know what I expect to see. Usually it's nothing, just stars, blinking like they always do. But every so often there's a spot that feels wrong. We were already asleep when it happened. I think it was around 2:40 in the morning, but I'm not totally sure because the clocks were all screwed up afterward. What I remember is a flash, like lightning, but brighter. It lit up the entire bedroom for a second, and then it was just dark again. No thunder. No sound at all. Mara sat up next to me, squinting at the window. She thought maybe it was a transformer blowing down the road. We live in a pretty quiet cul-de-sac outside of Asheville, North Carolina. Nothing crazy ever happens out here, just a row of houses, woods behind us, the Blue Ridge a few miles off in the distance. It was a cool night, maybe low 50s, and totally clear. I got up to check just in case. Our dog, Kip, didn't even bark. That should have been the first red flag. He's a mutt, part cattle dog, part who knows what, and he loses it if someone so much as walks past the mailbox. But that night he stayed curled up in his bed by the dresser, eyes open but still. I pulled the curtain back. The street was empty. Not a single car. Nothing glowing or sparking, no wind, no hum. Just quiet. Almost too quiet, now that I think back. There's always some kind of noise out here. Crickets, wind through the trees, a car in the distance. But it felt like the whole neighborhood had just stopped. When I went to check my phone for the time, the screen was black. Not off. Black. Wouldn't respond to the charger, wouldn't reset. Just dead. I checked the digital clock on my nightstand. It was blinking 12:01. That's when I noticed the hall light was already on. We always keep it off at night. Kip's sensitive to it. But it was on, casting that weird yellow glow into the bedroom. I walked out thinking maybe Mara had turned it on and forgotten, but she was still in bed, just sitting up, listening. We went through the whole house together, in like one room at a time. Every single clock, the one on the stove, the microwave, even the old radio clock in the garage, was blinking 12:01. But none of them were right. It wasn't just a power outage. The weird part is the stove had a battery backup. It shouldn't have reset like that. And my old watch, which I keep in a drawer by the entryway, was dead too. It had a fresh battery. I just changed it that week. Kip finally got up and started pacing in circles by the back door, not whining, just low growls. He'd stop and sniff at the door like someone was standing on the other side. Then he'd back up, hackles up, and walk away. Repeat, over and over. I opened the back door, real slow, nothing there. No animals, no movement. The woods were pitch black, but I could tell the air was different. Cooler, somehow. Like it had dropped 5 degrees since we'd gone to bed. The kind of cold that feels dry and still like winter air, even though it wasn't winter. Mara came up behind me and put her hand on my shoulder. Neither of us said anything. That's when Kip bolted out into the yard. Full sprint, tail down, making a wide loop like he was chasing something, but there was nothing there. He ran halfway to the tree line, then stopped hard and just stood there, dead still, facing the woods. He didn't bark. We called him. Loud. He didn't budge. I had to walk out there and snap my fingers in front of his face to get him to look at me. His eyes were wide, ears flat. When I touched his collar, he flinched like I'd shocked him. He followed me back to the house, but kept stopping to look behind us. No tail wag, no interest in sniffing the grass like usual, just this locked-on stare at the woods. We double-checked all the doors and windows, turned off the lights, and tried to go back to sleep. Neither of us could. I think I finally dozed off around 4. Mara stayed up the whole time, sitting on the edge of the bed, listening. In the morning, our phone still wouldn't turn on. Mine had been on the charger all night, hers too. We had to use the landline in the kitchen to call work and let them know we'd be late. The cable box was dead. The router wasn't even broadcasting. Our desktop wouldn't boot, just made this quiet clicking noise when I tried. Weirdest of all, the old flip phone we keep in the junk drawer for emergencies, you know. That was dead too. It wasn't plugged in, just sitting there. Battery had been full the week before. Nothing. Mara noticed the plants in the kitchen looked strange. The big pothouse by the window had these thin white spots along the edges of the leaves like frostburn. The cactus on the windowsill looked slightly wilted, which I'd never seen before. It survived 3 moves and years of neglect. Kip wouldn't go near the back door the whole day. Every time we walked by, he'd take a wide arc around the kitchen table, tail tucked. Even when we tried to coax him out for a walk, he'd pull toward the front yard only. Wouldn't step near the back gate. By the afternoon, power was working fine, but nothing with a battery would hold charge. I borrowed a neighbor's phone to make some calls. Duke Energy hadn't had any outages reported on our street. No storms, no scheduled work, nothing. We checked the doorbell camera footage later that night. It had reset too, but the internal storage had saved one last clip, a few seconds before it died. The timestamp was messed up and the footage was grainy, but you could make out the flash. The whole yard lit up white, not blue like lightning, more sterile, almost like a camera flash but much brighter. It looked like it came from directly above the house. That was it. Then, static. We didn't talk about it with anyone for a while, not even close friends. It just felt too weird to explain without sounding nuts. A few days later, Mara noticed something on her laptop charger, this faint discoloration on the metal prongs, like they'd been burned, just slightly. You wouldn't notice unless you were really looking. The plastic around them was intact, but the metal was darkened. Same thing on the phone chargers. Not melted, just off, like they'd all been exposed to some kind of intense surge or heat. But the breakers in the house were fine. Nothing had flipped. I started sleeping lighter after that, waking up at odd hours. Kip would do it too. We'd both jolt up around 3 or 4 a.m. and just lie there staring into the dark. No barking, just this stillness, like the whole house was holding its breath. It passed, eventually. A few weeks later, things mostly felt normal again. Electronics started working, though we replaced a lot of them. The clocks never did go back to normal. Every one we reset would end up drifting. Not fast or slow, just off by a minute or two every few days, like they were syncing to something else. We bought a new microwave and a new router. Mara switched to an analog watch. I got rid of the smart plugs. Kip still won't go near the back fence. I was about 9 miles into the loop when I first saw it. This was in late September last year, up in Lawson National Forest. I'd taken a week off work and was hiking solo, something I do once or twice a year just to clear my head. I'd parked near Juniper Lake and was planning to camp 2 nights out in the backcountry. Nothing crazy, just the usual, a hammock, freeze-dried food, my little camp stove. I'd done the route before, but never in the fall. It was quieter than usual, colder too. That afternoon had been still, no wind, no animals that I noticed. I'd seen a couple deer that morning, but nothing since noon. The trail thinned out past a ridge, and by mile 9 I was mostly bushwhacking. I was cutting across a slope to rejoin a marked trail down near Swan Lake. I had a paper map and GPS, so I wasn't worried about getting lost. But I remember feeling like the air had changed, like it had flattened out. The way it does right before a thunderstorm. No smell, just a heaviness. I came over a little rise and saw it in a clearing maybe 50 feet across. A perfect circle in the middle of the trees. Burnt out ground, blackened and smooth. Not charred like a fire pit, there wasn't any ash or brush left. Just bare earth, like the top layer had been scraped off with something hot. The edges of the circle were sharp, too. No feathering, no signs of spread. It looked like someone had cut it with a giant cookie cutter. What stood out more than the scorched earth were the trees. The pines all around it, tall, maybe 20 to 30 feet each, had these little shifts in their needles. The whole ring. Not broken branches or bent trunks, just the needles, all subtly angled outward, like they'd been pushed. Not snapped or blown, but fanned back. Even the tiny new growths at the tips, like whatever happened in that circle pushed out in every direction, evenly from the center. I stepped up to the edge and stopped there. I didn't cross it. I don't know why. It felt wrong, like stepping onto it would be a bad idea. And I don't usually spook easy. I've camped all over the Sierras and Rockies. I've had mountain lions come within 100 feet of my tent. But this was different. There was no sound, not even insects. I crouched and touched the edge. The ground was warm. Not hot, but warmer than it should have been for mid-afternoon in the shade. And dry, bone dry, even though the soil just outside the ring was still soft from rain 2 nights earlier. I dug in with my finger and couldn't even get beneath the surface. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes. Not moving, just staring at it. There were no footprints, no tire marks, no signs of anything being dragged in or out. It wasn't a campsite. No rocks arranged, no leftover gear, just this perfectly bald circle and those outward-leaning pine needles. I marked the spot on my GPS and backed away. I didn't set up camp anywhere near it. I pushed on another 1.5 miles, found a spot near a creek, and hung my hammock there. That night I couldn't sleep. It wasn't fear exactly, just a jittery feeling, like I'd had too much coffee. I kept thinking about the trees, how precise it all looked. Around midnight, I stepped out with my flashlight to relieve myself and saw something strange across the treetops. A faint glow. White, but not like moonlight. It didn't pulse or move, just stayed there, hovering low on the horizon, way above where the circle would have been, if I was estimating right. I watched it for maybe a minute, then it flickered and went out. No sound. Next morning, I hiked straight back to the circle. It looked the same, still dry, still warm. I took some photos on my phone, but they don't show much, just a black patch of dirt. You can't see the subtle angles of the trees in a picture. I walked around the full perimeter. No animal tracks, no bugs, a few fallen branches, but none inside the ring. Then I noticed something else. The ring wasn't completely flat. Dead center, there was a slight indentation, maybe 3 inches lower than the rest of it. I stood just outside the edge and tossed a small stick toward the middle. It hit and bounced once. Made this soft thud like landing on packed sand, but it didn't roll. It just stopped. And when I tried to get closer, I swear the hair on my arms stood up, like static but deeper. My ears felt full, like when you're gaining altitude. I left. The hike back out was quiet. No birds, again, just wind in the trees. But something had shifted. I kept thinking I heard footsteps behind me, just faint enough to question. I'd stop and listen and there'd be nothing, just that faint wind. I told myself it was nerves, but I picked up my pace, got back to the car in half the time it usually takes me. I didn't talk about it with anyone for a while. I figured I'd dreamt up the glow in the trees, or maybe the circle was from some controlled burn I hadn't heard about. But I checked with the Forest Service. No burns had been scheduled or reported in that area. No lightning strikes either, not for weeks. 2 months later, I went back, late November. Snow had started falling at higher elevations, but the spot was still accessible. I wanted to see if it was still there, or if maybe it had been covered up or changed. It hadn't. The ring was still there, still clean, still bare, and the trees still looked the same, though it was harder to tell with snow on some of the branches. I brushed a few needles clear and saw they were still angled outward. Not drooping, angled, like they'd grown that way. I didn't get close this time, just looked from the ridge above. There were tracks that day, animal ones, a few deer trails, some squirrel prints in the snow. But none went near the ring. They all curved wide around it, like something instinctive told them not to go near it. On the way out, I found something else. About 100 yards from the circle, I passed a tree with this long vertical strip of bark peeled back. About 6 feet high, maybe a foot wide. No burn marks, no sap leaking out. just peeled. Clean, like it had been done with a tool. There were smaller strips missing on a few nearby trees, too. Some high up, maybe 10 or 12 feet. No claw marks, no chew, just smooth, shaved wood. I haven't been back since. Not because I'm scared exactly, just because I don't think there's anything else to learn from it. Whatever happened there wasn't recent, and it wasn't normal. I've been hiking in national forests my whole life. I've seen weird things, old mining gear in places it shouldn't be, cairns in the middle of nowhere, even one of those old planes half buried in trees up near Tahoe, but never anything like circle. I've stopped trying to explain it. I just don't go that direction anymore. It started with a box of old paperwork in the garage. I was going through stuff to make space. My daughter had finally talked me into turning the back wall into shelves for her garden supplies, and I found a stack of binders from my last years at the tower. I retired from FAA operations in 2012 after 33 years, most of that spent working air traffic control at Minneapolis Center. Sector work, mostly. Some tower shifts when they needed coverage. I hadn't thought about that job in a long time. I loved it, but it wore me out. The rotating shifts, the constant focus. It messes with your head after a few decades. Anyway, I opened one of the binders just to flip through, and I found this log sheet, Sector R57, high altitude over northern Wisconsin. The radar track was highlighted in yellow, which is something we usually only did when we flagged an unusual incident. I didn't remember this one at all. The code on the sheet was just unknown 4930. No transponder, no flight plan, nothing. That wasn't entirely unheard of. Military aircraft sometimes do low-key passes, or small planes show up without squawking. But what caught me was the path. I pulled out the old radar plots from the folder and laid them out on the workbench. Each page showed a 5-minute interval. And this track was bizarre. It started like a normal intercept. Entered the sector at FL 370, coming down from the northeast. No ID, no handoff. Speed was high, well above what I'd expect from a private jet or commercial. Then it slowed. Not gradually, like an instant deceleration. From what would have been Mach 0.9 to almost a hover in the span of one sweep. That's not the kind of thing you see on FAA radar. The next few sweeps showed it drifting in a slow arc. It doubled back, drew a half loop, then traced a perfect circle. Like someone had programmed it to draw shapes, but every motion was fluid. No sharp turns, no altitude loss, just these impossible patterns that no aircraft I know could manage. I figured maybe the radar system glitched. That happens sometimes with echoes or when a transponder got jammed up, but usually that shows as jumpy, broken data. This was too smooth, too intentional, and it was only the one target. Everything else in the airspace was clean. The weirdest thing was the time. It stayed in our sector for 26 minutes, never crossed a boundary. It moved around like it was playing, drew tight spirals, S-curves, loops so tight no jet could have pulled them without disintegrating, and then it just vanished. No exit sweep, no fade. It just disappeared between scans. The notes in the margin just said no visual confirmation, no pilot reports, NORAD pinged, negative response, logged for review. I flipped through the rest of the binder and found another log. Same date, same general area, 2 hours later. An American Eagle flight out of Duluth had radioed in to report a bright white light above cloud layer, pacing us at constant distance, no altitude reading. ATC had asked them to clarify, and the crew said it wasn't a plane. Not moving like one, hovered, then shifted left. Still with us. They lost sight of it 10 minutes later when they dropped below the clouds. That wasn't filed as a serious incident, just a light anomaly note in the comment section. I looked up the flight on my laptop, September 8th, 2011, flight 4820. It did exist. The timing lined up, but there's no mention anywhere of an encounter. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The track, the way it moved like it wasn't constrained by physics, and we had the radar return. It wasn't a blip. It was 30 scans worth of data. Consistent. Real. I dug out my old thumb drive with the archival software. It barely ran on my current computer, but I got it to load. Plugged in the coordinates from the radar sheet, set the time window, and ran the playback. The track showed up in blue, a ghost moving through empty sky. I zoomed in. The loops weren't random. They were geometrically perfect. A figure eight that retraced itself to the pixel, a tight diamond, then a sudden vertical climb, 2,000 feet in under a second. The system capped it at FL 600, but the trail kept going up. It just clipped out of range. I'd never seen anything like it. The system labeled it Unknown Class A. That was an internal tag we used sometimes for clutter or birds that registered above normal airspace, but this wasn't that. It was too clean, too deliberate. I emailed my old coworker Greg, who retired a few years after me. We used to run the same shifts. I asked if he remembered anything about that night, September 8th, 2011, R57, weird radar track. He called me the next morning. Yeah, he said. I remember that. He didn't elaborate at first, just sat there breathing into the phone. Then he said, we weren't supposed to talk about it. Apparently they had a closed-door meeting the day after. A couple guys from DC flew in, not FAA, not military, Greg wasn't sure who. They asked for all the logs, all the playback files. No one got in trouble. They just handed it over, and that was it. Did you ever find out what it was? I asked. No, he said, but it wasn't a glitch. We talked for a while. He told me he'd seen the radar feed in real time. He was on comms with a flight out of Thunder Bay when it popped up. He thought it was a drone at first, but it was too high, too fast. And when he tried to tag it, the system kicked it back, said, no transponder. He tried to hand it off to the next sector. They didn't see anything. I asked him if anyone had scrambled jets. He said no. They ran a few checks with NORAD, but nothing went up. The more I thought about it, the more it bothered me. Not just what it was, but how easily it got brushed aside. We logged it, boxed it up, and forgot it. 2 nights ago, I went back through the rest of the box, found another incident from 2007, similar path, similar altitude. No ID. This one was even shorter, only 5 minutes. Just a single jagged turn and a vertical ascent. Same sector. There was no follow-up on that one. No notes. Just no conflict reported. I haven't told my family. My daughter would roll her eyes. She thinks I spend too much time in the garage anyway. But I printed out the track from that 2011 log, the one with the loops, and pinned it above my workbench. It doesn't look like a flight path. It looks like something drawn by a compass. I've run the numbers on the loops, the angles, the distances. They're too exact, too intentional. Nothing flies like that. Not here, not with wings. I'd camped in the Mojave a dozen times before, always solo. Something about the emptiness out there calmed me. No cell signal, no people, no noise. Just rocks, sky, and space to breathe. This time, I parked farther off the service road than usual, about 10 miles south of Baker, near a dried-up wash I'd only explored once before. I had enough water, food, and gas. No real plan. Just a few nights to clear my head. It was mid-October. Still warm in the day, but the nights dropped into the 50s. No clouds, no wind, just dry air and wide-open sky. I brought my dog Huck, short for Huckleberry, a lanky cattle dog mix who gets anxious in cities but acts like a monk out in the wild. He never strays far from the tent at night. Always alert, always listening. That first night went fine. Just the usual noises, crickets, maybe a coyote yipping far off. I set up camp on a flat patch of hardpan, got a small fire going, and had a tin of beans and some jerky. Huck lay curled beside me the whole time, ears flicking now and then. Around 10, we turned in. Second night was when it started. Around 11, I was still up, just watching the fire burn down. Huck was outside the tent with me, head on his paws. The sky was clear. You could see every star. No moon that night, but the starlight was bright enough to see your own shadow if your eyes adjusted. I remember noticing how still it was. No wind, no rustling, just that weird desert silence that feels too big to be natural. Then I heard what I thought was a jet, way high up, that deep, distant rumble. At first, I didn't even look up. Jets go over all the time, especially that close to Edwards and Nellis, but something about the sound was wrong. It wasn't fading in or out like usual. It stayed steady, but didn't get louder. Just this low pressure in the air, like it was all around me, not coming from one direction. Huck sat up, ears stiff, and looked straight up. That's what made me look too. Where he was staring, dead center above our heads, there were no stars. Just this solid patch of black, maybe the size of my outstretched hand. It wasn't a cloud, the sky was too clear, and it wasn't that the stars were faint, they were just gone. That part of the sky looked blank, like someone cut a hole in it. I stood up and backed away from the fire, trying to see it better. The shape didn't move, didn't shift or blur like clouds do. Just a clean, fixed patch of darkness. The longer I stared, the more sure I was that it wasn't sky. It felt close. Closer than anything up there should have been. The sound kept going, not loud, but deep, like pressure in my ears. Not painful, but enough to make my stomach feel weird. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been 5 minutes, maybe 10. Then the sound stopped. Not faded, just off. Like someone threw a switch. And then the stars were back. Instantly. That patch of sky looked normal again. No wind, no sound. Huck was standing stiff-legged next to me, staring straight up, tail low. I reached down and touched his side. He flinched hard, then looked at me like he didn't recognize me for half a second. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, I hiked out a few miles, tried to clear my head. Told myself it was an illusion, maybe a weird weather thing, maybe even just my eyes playing tricks. I didn't really believe that, but I needed something to tell myself. That evening, I kept the fire big. Brought Huck inside the tent with me early. He didn't protest, just curled tight at my feet, eyes on the zippered flap. I dozed off around 10. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. No sound had woken me. Just that feeling, like something wasn't right. Huck was sitting up now, ears perked, staring at the side of the tent facing away from the fire. His whole body was tense. I unzipped the flap and looked out. Nothing. But it wasn't normal nothing. The fire had burned down to coals, but it wasn't completely dark. The rocks, the sand, the wash, it all looked the same. But there was this feeling like space was wrong, like the air had weight to it. The kind of feeling you get when a storm's coming, but worse. My ears rang faintly. Huck didn't move. I stepped out barefoot and stood beside the tent. The sky was clear again, stars sharp and bright. But I noticed right away, they were in the wrong place. Or not wrong, exactly. Just slightly off. I couldn't tell how, but it was like the constellations were stretched. The angles didn't match what I remembered. And then I realized it wasn't the whole sky. It was just one part, directly above camp, where that blank patch had been the night before. Like someone had taken a picture of the stars and then printed it just a little too wide. Then I heard it again, that deep, steady sound. Not a roar, more like a vibration. But I couldn't feel it in my chest like bass. I felt it in my teeth, like a tuning fork held against bone. I looked up. No missing stars this time. But something was there. I couldn't see it directly. It was like my eyes refused to focus on that part of the sky. Every time I tried, I'd blink and realize I'd looked away without meaning to. Then Huck barked, one loud, sharp bark, and from somewhere out past the wash, maybe a few hundred feet, came a second bark. Exactly the same, like an echo, but louder. Same pitch, same rhythm, but too far off and too soon after to be a real echo. Huck's ears flattened. He backed into the tent. I stood there, heart racing, staring into the dark where that second bark had come from. Then a light flickered. It wasn't a flashlight or a fire, just a dim, pale flash like a camera strobe, but slower. Not from the sky, from the ground, maybe waist high. It blinked once, then again farther to the right. I didn't wait to see more. I pulled Huck into the truck and locked the doors. I didn't even take the tent down. Just left it with the sleeping bag and the gear still inside. Started the engine, flipped on the high beams, and drove without checking the GPS. Just followed the dirt track I came in on until I hit the service road. Drove all the way to Barstow before I stopped. Pulled into a motel around 4 a.m., slept a few hours with the curtains open and the TV on low. Huck didn't sleep. He just sat facing the door, ears up, growling once or twice at nothing. Next morning I went back out, partly to prove to myself it had all been in my head. The tent was still there. Everything untouched. No footprints, no signs of animals, nothing burned or broken. But the air still felt off. Not wrong, just heavy, like it was holding its breath. I packed up and left before noon. Haven't been back since. I was driving east on Route 20 through northern Maine, about halfway between Jackman and Moose River. If you've ever been out there, you know it's not a place you want to break down. 2-lane road, dense trees on both sides, barely any shoulder. No streetlights, no houses for miles, just a ribbon of pavement winding through pine forest and empty air. It was just after 9 p.m., early May, still cold enough that the windows stayed shut and my coat stayed on. The sun had gone down a little while before, but there was still a faint red line on the horizon behind me. I was heading back to Bar Harbor after visiting my uncle. I hadn't wanted to drive at night, but I left late. Figured I'd at least make it to Skowhegan before stopping. My dog Marla was in the back seat, curled up tight like she always did when we drove long stretches. She's a shepherd mix, anxious with strangers but calm in the car. I remember glancing in the rearview mirror and seeing her eyes half open, catching just the faintest glint from the dashboard lights. I saw the light maybe 15 minutes after passing the sign for Rockwood Road. It was high up, just above the treetops on the left side of the highway. This single white light, brighter than a star, but not moving like a plane. At first, I figured it was a tower. You get a few blinking lights on radio masts out here, even in the woods, but this one wasn't blinking, and it wasn't red. I kept driving. Trees were thick on both sides, and the light dipped behind them for a minute, then came back into view, still on my left, maybe a few hundred feet up. I slowed down a little, thought maybe it was a drone. But it wasn't drifting or circling, it was keeping pace with me. Every time the road curved, I'd see it again, always the same distance away. I tried rolling the window down a crack. No buzzing, no rotor sound, just the wind. Marla sat up then, not suddenly, just slowly lifted her head and stared out the driver's side window. Didn't growl, didn't whine, just watched. I drove for another mile, maybe more. The light stayed with us. It never bobbed or changed position. It didn't cast a beam, either, just glowed. Like a headlight aimed straight down, except there was no beam. Just this dull, steady white. Hard to explain. I pulled over, not all the way because there's no real shoulder out there, just soft gravel and a drainage ditch. I kept the engine running and leaned forward, trying to get a better look through the windshield. The light stopped, too. Dead still, no sound, not even the hum of an engine. It didn't move when I did. I got out of the car slowly and stepped around to the front. It was directly above the tree line, not in the trees, not above the road, just hovering off to the left. No blinking, no shape I could make out, just the light. I stood there, hands on the hood, watching it. I think I said something out loud like, "What the hell are you?" But I didn't feel brave. I felt stupid, like I'd stepped out into a moment that wasn't meant for me. Then it blinked off, no fade, no flicker. 1 second it was there, the next it wasn't. I waited a full minute, maybe more. Nothing. The woods were dead silent, no wind, no crickets. Just me and the ticking of the engine cooling under the hood. I got back in the car. Marla was sitting up, staring out the window still. I kept watching the trees as I pulled back onto the road. My hands were sweating against the wheel. I drove maybe 2 miles before I saw the light again. This time it was ahead of me, maybe a quarter mile up, hovering above the road. Still white, still quiet, still too high to be a drone. I let off the gas. Marla whined once, real low in her throat. I didn't stop again, just kept moving, slow and steady. The light stayed put as I got closer, and for a second I thought I'd pass right under it. But right before I did, it blinked off again. Same way, just gone. No sound, no whoosh of movement, just empty sky. I drove another 20 minutes without seeing anything. The woods stayed thick. No cars passed me going the other direction. No signs of cabins or camps. Just darkness and those narrow, winding turns through pine. I was starting to think I imagined it, or that it was some weird plane I couldn't place. Then the radio popped on. I hadn't touched it. It was off the whole time since I left Jackman. No stations come in out there anyway. But it crackled suddenly, loud and sharp, like when you plug in an amp. Then just this hissing static. Not full static either, like gaps in it, like breathing. I turned it off right away. My hands were shaking now. I didn't look up again after that. Just kept my eyes on the road and drove straight through to Skowhegan. Pulled into the first gas station I saw. Filled up, let Marla out to pee, and sat there for a long while before heading on. The sky looked normal again. Planes, stars, distant towers, nothing unusual. Marla didn't settle down until we were almost to Waterville. That was 2 years ago. I haven't taken that route since. It started around 9 at night on a Thursday. I was sitting in my living room in Riverton, Idaho, small town, lots of pine trees, pretty quiet most of the time, when my porch light started flickering. Not just a quick blink, but this steady, rhythmic flicker. It went on and off, like someone was trying to send Morse code or something. The weirdest part was it wasn't random. It had a pattern. I counted it. 6 blinks, pause, then 6 blinks again, over and over. I didn't think much of it at first. Sometimes the wiring in these older houses acts up, especially when the wind picks up or the power is fluctuating. But when my phone buzzed with a message from my neighbor, Diane, I got a little weirded out. "Lights flickering here too," she texted. Same pattern. That's when I checked the neighborhood Facebook group. More people were posting about their porch lights doing the exact same thing. Across the street, a couple on Maple Drive had theirs flickering, even the guy 2 blocks down near the school. It was all the same pattern, all starting around the same time. I grabbed Fen, my dog, a border collie mix with graying fur and a twitchy tail, and went outside. The air was cold for early May, with a slight chill that hinted at a rain coming overnight. I looked up at the streetlights and the stars. Clear sky, no clouds, but the flickering porch light made the shadows jump around weirdly. Fen immediately started growling low in his throat, stiffening at the edge of the porch. I knelt down and scratched behind his ears. Usually he's calm on these walks, but he was jittery tonight. That's when I heard it. A faint, high-pitched humming. It wasn't constant, but came in waves, almost like it was syncing with the flickering lights. I told myself it was probably some kind of transformer buzzing, or maybe a nearby power line acting up. But the humming kept getting louder, and Fen pulled hard against the leash, trying to get back inside. His ears were flat, eyes wide. I looked up again. There was nothing visible in the sky, no planes or drones, no blinking aircraft lights. I walked Fen down the block to see if Diane was outside, but her porch was dark. I texted her to check on her dog, a big mutt named Boomer, who usually loved hanging outside at night. She texted back about 10 minutes later saying Boomer was hiding under the couch and wouldn't come out. I went to check in on my other neighbor, Jack, who lives 2 doors down. When I knocked, he opened the door looking pale. "Did you see the lights? Mine have been flickering nonstop for an hour," he said, rubbing his neck like he had a headache. "Yeah, same here," I told him. "What about Duke? Is he okay?" He shook his head. "He's been under the bed since it started. Won't eat or come out." That's when I realized it wasn't just Fen or Boomer acting strange. Pets all over the block were hiding or refusing to come out of their safe spots. I didn't know if it was the flickering lights or that humming sound. Whatever it was messing with them. Back at my house, Fen refused to go back outside. He just sat at the threshold, whining softly, looking up at the sky again and again. It was like he was watching something I couldn't see. I tried to ignore it and went back inside, but the flickering kept going. I went to the fuse box, thinking maybe I could kill power to the porch light, but everything checked out fine. The circuit breaker wasn't tripped or anything. The lights just kept flickering in that exact pattern. I started timing it. 6 blinks, pause, 6 blinks, pause. It was hypnotic, like a metronome for some invisible signal. Around midnight, I heard my phone ping. Diane again. Lights stopped. Boomer's finally out from under the couch, but acting weird. Won't look up. I looked out my window. My porch light had gone steady. No more flickering. Fen was asleep on the couch, but even in sleep, his ears twitched like he was listening for something. I tried to sleep, but I kept waking up, hearing that same humming deep in the walls or maybe my head. The next morning, everyone was talking about it. Lights flickering all over Riverton, pets acting strange, people reporting odd sensations like nausea or pressure in their heads during the night. Jack said he checked the electric company and they had no outages or issues on the line. I took Fen for a walk early the next day. The sky overcast, the air heavy and damp from the rain that finally came overnight. He was his normal self, tail wagging, sniffing everything. But I caught him looking up a few times, head tilting like he was trying to figure out what happened. We didn't talk about it much after that night. It was like whatever it was had passed, but I can't shake the feeling that something was out there, messing with the lights, messing with the animals. Every time I sit on the porch now, I half expect to see the flickering start again. Fen sometimes stops and looks up like he did that night, but I can't see anything. That's where it's left me, just sitting, waiting, watching the sky, wondering if whatever it was might come back or if it was just some glitch in the world that we barely caught at all. Um, I was driving out near McPherson County last August, just poking around some back roads where the GPS cuts out. I do that sometimes, bring the dog, fill a cooler with gas station stuff, and just go. I used to do a bit of photography, so I'd scout for old barns and silos. Kansas has no shortage of those. Most are half collapsed or rotted to hell, but every now and then you find one that's still standing, just forgotten. I had my mutt Ruckus in the back seat. He's part healer, part whatever made him run in circles when he's excited. Good dog. Doesn't bark much. We'd been driving maybe 4 hours and the sun was starting to hang low. That kind of dry, hot dusk where everything's orange but the air's still thick and warm. I spotted a cluster of buildings behind a line of wind-warped cottonwoods. Old farmhouse, big red barn, a couple sheds. No fence, no signs, not even a mailbox. Just gravel crunching under the tires and then hardpack as I pulled in. Ruckus hopped out first and started sniffing around. I followed, grabbing my camera bag and a flashlight even though it was still light out. The house was nothing special. All boarded up, roof sagging. I didn't bother going in. The barn was more interesting. Tall, weather-beaten, but intact. One side had caved in a little, and you could see an old grain chute hanging crooked from the loft. I went inside, gave Ruckus a whistle when he wandered toward the far field. Inside, it smelled like dry rot and mice. Sunlight cut through gaps in the planks like blades. I took a few shots, mostly texture stuff. Rusted hinges, old signage half covered in grime. I didn't hear anything weird, not yet. Just the usual birds outside, Ruckus's nails ticking on concrete. When I stepped back out, the air felt off. Like someone had turned down the volume on everything. No birds, no bugs. The trees weren't moving even though I could have sworn there was a breeze earlier. Ruckus was sitting about 20 yards out at the edge of the field behind the barn, staring straight ahead. Not sniffing, not pacing, just locked up, ears forward, tail down. I called to him. He didn't move. I figured maybe there was a deer or coyote out there, so I started walking over. Grass was knee-high and dry as paper. It rustled under my boots, but didn't sway. I didn't notice right away what I was walking toward. There was a clearing out in the middle of the field. Big one, at least 50 feet across, maybe more. Crops, some kind of sorghum or millet, I couldn't tell, had been flattened, but not like wind or machinery. It was too clean. Every stalk laid down the same way, all in a tight spiral pattern, clockwise from the center out. No breaks, just bent clean at the base. Perfectly smooth. I stood there looking at it, then back at Ruckus, who still hadn't moved. His ears were trembling a little now. I walked into the spiral, and that's when it hit me. The air wasn't just quiet. It was dead. No wind, no bugs, no planes overhead, no highway hum in the distance, just the sound of my own breathing and the crunch of my boots. The center of the spiral had a small indent, like someone had pressed a single foot into the dirt and pivoted. No boot tread, no prints, just a shallow swirl in the soil, bare, and dry. Ruckus whined. That's what finally broke it, a low, drawn-out whine I'd never heard from him before. He turned and bolted back toward the car. I didn't stick around much longer. I walked out of the spiral and back through the barn. The air felt heavier, like there was static in it. I kept checking over my shoulder. Nothing there, just the same trees and fields. But everything felt wrong. Like I was being watched, but not by anything with eyes. More like the place itself was watching, if that makes sense. When I got to the car, Ruckus was already inside, curled on the back seat, shaking. I got in and shut the door and sat there for a second with my hand on the wheel, just listening. Still no sound. I turned the key and the engine coughed but didn't start. Tried again, nothing. The radio flashed on for half a second, then off. No cranking, just silence. Battery light came on, even though it was new. I sat there staring at the field through the windshield, trying not to panic. I pulled out my phone. No service, but it showed the time, 6:47. I remember that because it felt later than that, way later. The sun hadn't moved much, but I was sweating and tired like it had been hours. After a few minutes, I tried the key again. This time it started like nothing had happened. Ruckus let out a huff, but stayed curled up. I reversed, back down the dirt lane, and didn't look in the rear view. The weirdest part came when I checked the photos later. I'd taken at least 20 shots inside the barn, detailed stuff. Light beams, rust, shadows. Every one of them came out fine, but the last shot I took, the spiral in the field, was just black. Not blurry, not overexposed. Just completely black, like the shutter never opened. The frame before it was normal, a shot of the barn's exterior as I walked out. After that, nothing. I checked the metadata, and the timestamp for the black photo was 5:06 p.m., over an hour earlier than what my phone said when I was sitting in the car. I didn't tell anyone about it right away. What would I even say? Hey, I found a crop circle and time doesn't work right out there. People already think I spend too much time alone, but I've gone back through that area twice since just to see if I can find it again. I never did. Even the barn's gone. Not collapsed, just gone. Like it was never there. I worked as a mechanic at Holloman back in the early 2000s. Did 8 years active Air Force, then went contract when I got out. Most of the stuff I worked on was boring. Standard maintenance, diagnostics, loadouts, whatever they needed. Nothing classified, not really. Just day-to-day jobs on old airframes that hadn't changed much in 20 years. Then in 2008, I got pulled into a short-term project out at a hangar near the North Perimeter. Not one of the usual bays. This was one of those standalone Quonset-style setups, kind of tucked away from the main pad. The request came through a guy I didn't recognize, civilian clothes, but badge access. He handed me a sealed clipboard and said I'd be assisting on thermal systems inspection for something post-flight. I remember being confused because they didn't give me a checklist, just a form with my name, the date, and a single line that said, "Report anomalies." No tail number, no maintenance logs. That's not how things are usually done. When I got inside, the hangar was almost empty. Just one piece of equipment under a tarp and 2 other guys already standing around it. One was another contractor I vaguely recognized, name was Rolston or something like that, and the other was Air Force, young, probably a captain. Neither of them said much, just nodded. We all stood there for a minute until the guy with the badge came back in and said, "All right, gloves on." They pulled the tarp off. I expected some kind of drone or test vehicle, maybe a new unmanned thing, but what was under there didn't look like anything I'd ever seen fly. It was small, maybe the length of a pickup truck, shaped kind of like a teardrop but flatter, like if you pressed down on a water balloon. No wings, no intakes, no landing gear, and it was perfectly smooth. Not just clean paneling smooth, I mean not a single seam, no rivets, no weld lines. The whole thing looked like it had been poured into one solid piece and somehow hardened that way. Even the surface was weird. Dark gray, almost black, but not shiny. It absorbed light. You could run your hand along it and it felt like stone, not metal, but it didn't scuff or leave fingerprints. And the weirdest part? It was cold. I mean, freezing. This thing had supposedly just finished a flight test. That's what the captain said. But touching it felt like grabbing a piece of dry ice. My glove stuck a little when I held it too long in one spot. Rolston touched it barehanded and swore under his breath. I saw the skin on his palm turn red like a mild burn. I asked what it was, and the badge guy just said, "You're not here for that. Just inspect and report." So I started looking it over. I brought out a handheld thermal scope and aimed it across the surface. The screen showed basically nothing, 0 heat signature. Ambient air temp was showing mid-80s inside the hangar, and this thing didn't register even that. Just dead black on the scope. I checked again using a contact probe, same result. Flatline. I tried a multimeter on a few spots, no response. Rolston tried a mag probe, also nothing. No conductivity, no magnetic reaction. It was like the thing wasn't anything. Just a shape with mass and weight and no properties. At one point I looked underneath. There were no fasteners, no vents, not even scratches or scoring like you'd get from landing. But there were these faint, almost invisible lines, like veins, that curved up from the bottom in a spiral pattern. They weren't raised or indented, more like changes in the material's tone. I ran my finger along one, and it felt just slightly warmer than the rest. Still cold, but not painfully so. The lines pulsed a little, like heat shimmer, even though there was no visible light or movement. I asked the captain if I should make note of that. He didn't answer. Around that time, someone outside shut the hangar doors. Lights dimmed, and the temperature dropped fast. You could see your breath. The badge guy said, "Wrap it up," but nobody moved. That's when the hum started. It wasn't loud, not even audible at first. It was more like pressure, like something deep in your head buzzing gently behind your ears. Rolston stepped back and rubbed his temple. I felt it in my jaw, like after a long car ride when your teeth still feel like they're vibrating. Then the surface started to ripple. Not like moving, not visibly, but when you looked straight at it, it felt like it wanted to move, like your eyes were sliding off it, and your brain was filling in shapes that weren't really there. It made me nauseous, and I've got a strong stomach. I remember blinking hard and focusing on a bolt on the floor just to stop from losing it. The captain left the hangar, just turned and walked out like he'd had enough. The badge guy said, "That's normal. It'll stop in a minute." And it did. The hum faded, the temperature leveled out, the surface went back to matte and smooth. We packed up quick after that. No final notes, no signatures. Just got our gear and left. Rolston didn't even say goodbye, just went straight to the lot and drove off. That night, my right ear rang until about 3 a.m. Next morning, I came in and checked the schedule. The hangar wasn't listed. The project number was gone from the logs. I asked my shift lead if he knew who was assigned there next. He just looked at me funny and said, "That bay's been closed for months." I didn't push it. A couple weeks later, I got reassigned to equipment at White Sands. Pretty normal work. I ran into Rolston once at the PX. He didn't say anything, just looked at me, then looked away, like he didn't want to admit we'd both seen the same thing. That was the only time in 20 years I worked on something that felt wrong. Not dangerous, just not made for us. Not meant to be touched or studied or taken apart. Just there. I still think about how cold it was, even after a flight. That doesn't make sense. Nothing does. I was working the night shift at the local radio monitoring station just outside Flagstaff, Arizona. The place was quiet except for the hum of equipment and the occasional crackle from the receivers. My job was basically to sit there and listen. Monitor open frequencies for anything unusual, from emergency broadcasts to random chatter from far-flung corners of the spectrum. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me time to think. That night, the air was dry and cool, typical for early spring in the desert. The windows were cracked open a little, letting in the smell of sagebrush and a faint hint of wood smoke from some neighbor's fireplace. I had my old German shepherd Fenn curled up at my feet. Fenn wasn't much of a watchdog, but he was company, especially when the silence gets thick. Around midnight, I was scrolling through the VHF band, headphones on, jotting down odd snippets. Mostly static or distant chatter from some amateur operators. Then something caught my attention on a channel I usually ignored. It was faint, but definitely there, a series of pulses that repeated every 47 seconds. I thought maybe it was a glitch or some weird atmospheric interference. The pattern didn't match any known beacon or weather station I'd ever tracked. I started recording it, noting the exact times it hit, and tried tuning around the frequency. No other signals on the same band, just that strange pulse. After about half an hour, the pattern started changing slightly. The pulses weren't evenly spaced anymore. Sometimes the gaps got shorter, sometimes longer, but it never lost the basic rhythm. It was too regular to be random, but too erratic for a proper transmission. It reminded me of Morse code, but with no recognizable letters. Fenn stirred, low growl, ears up. I glanced down. He was staring out the window toward the dark pines lining the property. I told him it was nothing, just some radio noise, but I felt uneasy. The radio signal suddenly dropped out, replaced by static. Then, out of the white noise, a voice came through, soft, strained, almost like a whisper carried on the wind. It said, "Clear as day, don't look up." I froze. The words repeated 2 more times, each with a slight delay, as if someone was on the other end struggling to speak. I checked my gear, everything was normal. No one else was on the channel, and there was no way to trace the source. I tried talking back, said, "Hello? Hello? Where are you?" But nothing came except the static hum. Fen barked once sharply, then went back to the floor, tail tucked. I sat back, heart pounding, trying to convince myself it was some prank or an interference from a distant repeater, but it wasn't like anything I'd heard before. I glanced out the window. The sky was clear, stars scattered in their usual indifferent patterns. No flashes, no strange lights, just the quiet desert night. For the next hour, I kept listening, but the signal never returned. I even scanned other bands, checked the neighbors' radios. Nothing unusual. When dawn broke, I went outside with Fen. The pine forest looked normal, the dirt roads still dusty and empty. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, just beyond the tree line. That day, I stayed home, unplugged the radios, and avoided looking up at the sky. The message replayed in my mind every time I did. I still don't know what it meant or where it came from, just that it was real enough to freeze me in place, sitting alone in a small radio shack in the middle of nowhere. I was fixing fence posts on the edge of town, just off County Road 17, near where the farmland thins out into open fields. It was late afternoon, early September, and the sun was low but still warm, casting long shadows over the dry grass. I was alone, just me and my dog, a lean border terrier named Charlie, who mostly stayed close, sniffing the ground or chasing grasshoppers. I had been pounding the last of the metal posts into the earth for a couple of hours. The job wasn't complicated, but it required patience, making sure the posts were straight and secure. I like working outside, especially in quiet places like this, where the only noise is the wind and my hammer hitting metal. Around 5:15 p.m., just as I was straightening the final post, I noticed this sharp, high-pitched whine. It was like the sound a dental drill makes, but softer and more constant. I stopped what I was doing and looked around, thinking maybe it was a distant plane or some kind of equipment down the road, but there was nothing else, just the wind and the crickets. Then I looked up. The sky was clear, fading from blue to a pale orange near the horizon, and right above me, maybe 40 feet off the ground, this black oval shape was moving slowly and silently across the sky. I mean, it was the most unnerving thing. Completely black, no windows or markings. It wasn't like a helicopter or drone. No rotors, no lights, no sound except for that whine, which seemed to come from the shape itself, almost like it was the source of the noise. What really got me was the grass beneath it. As the oval moved, the tall, dry grass swayed back and forth in a smooth wave, as if something huge was hovering just inches above it without actually touching it. There was no breeze or wind at the time, but the grass bent exactly under the path of the shape. Charlie froze and growled low in his throat, staring straight up, ears pinned back. I tried to call him over, but he just kept staring. I felt like I should run, but my legs were frozen. The thing moved slowly, almost lazily, just gliding over the field like it was surveying the ground below. It passed directly over me, close enough that I could see the sharp edges of the oval shape. It was perfectly matte black, no reflections, almost like it absorbed the light. The whine grew louder, then faded quickly as the shape moved farther away, heading toward the east, over the fields and out of sight. It didn't make any noise other than that whine, no engine, no wind from movement, just that eerie hum. After it disappeared, the grass gradually settled back to normal, like nothing had happened. Charlie shook himself and came over to me, tail tucked between his legs. I dropped my hammer and sat on the ground for a minute, trying to process what I'd just seen. I packed up my tools and we drove home. The whole way back, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that shape again, but nothing followed us. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the black oval moving silently overhead, the grass bending beneath it. The whine echoed in my ears. I checked the news and local forums the next day. Nothing about anything unusual in the area. No planes missing, no drone reports, no strange sightings. I went back to the site a couple days later during the day. The grass looked normal, no damage or weird marks. The fence posts were fine, no sign anything had disturbed the ground except me. Charlie seemed fine too, no lasting fear or anxiety. I still don't know what it was, The quiet, the grass bending like that, the shape itself, it wasn't like anything I'd ever heard about or seen before. Maybe it was some kind of experimental aircraft or drone. Maybe it was nothing more than a trick of light and sound. But something about that moment felt off, like I'd glimpsed something not meant for people to see. I'd been camping alone near Twin Pines Lake, out in northern Minnesota, just a couple miles off a logging road. It was late August, and the nights were already getting that crisp edge to them, even if the days still held the sun's heat. I picked the spot because it was quiet, away from the trails and the few cabins scattered around. Just the lake, the trees, and me. I set up my tent in a little clearing just a few feet from the water. There was this patch of soft dirt surrounded by pine needles and moss, perfect for staking the tent. My dog, Willow, a scruffy border collie mix with a white patch over one eye, was curled up at the tent's entrance, half asleep. We'd spent the afternoon hiking and fishing, and I was wiped out. I remember turning off my headlamp around 11 p.m. The lake was dead silent, except for the occasional splash of a fish or a frog croaking in the distance. Willow shifted a couple times, but stayed quiet. I was just about to drift off when I noticed something odd. There was this faint, rhythmic thumping sound coming from the woods across the lake. It wasn't loud, but it was definitely there, sort of like a slow, heavy heartbeat. It stopped after maybe a minute, and then the woods went quiet again. I figured it was probably a moose or some other animal moving around, so I didn't think much of it. I tried to ignore it and get back to sleep, but then I had this weird feeling, like I wasn't alone. Willow's ears perked up and she gave a low growl, staring out into the dark woods. I turned on my flashlight and scanned the tree line, but there was nothing, just shadows and black shapes. I settled back down, but the unease stuck with me. Eventually, I drifted off. When I woke up, it was just before dawn, around 5:30 a.m. The air was chilly, and the sky was this soft gray blue, heavy with fog rolling over the lake. Willow was gone from the tent entrance, which was strange because she never wandered off without me. I stepped outside, and that's when I saw it. Around the tent, pressed deep into the soft dirt, were these huge impressions. Not footprints, more like shallow pits, perfectly round, spaced out evenly in a pattern I couldn't explain. The holes looked like something heavy had hovered right above the ground and settled down with all its weight, but there was no sign of anything actually there. I knelt down and ran my fingers over one. The dirt was compacted and slightly cracked around the edges, like it had been pressed hard overnight. None of the pine needles or twigs were crushed or broken nearby, just the dirt, perfectly shaped into these strange marks. I looked around the clearing, but the only other footprints were mine and Willow's. No other tracks, no signs of animals, no branches broken or disturbed. The rest of the ground was untouched. I called for Willow, and after a moment, I heard her barking down near the water's edge. I rushed over and found her standing stiffly, staring out across the lake. She didn't come when I called. When I got close, she turned and ran back to the tent, but stayed close to my side after that. The whole area felt off. The usual forest smells were faint, and there was this strange silence, like everything was holding its breath. Later that morning, while I was packing up, I noticed something else. My GPS watch had lost time overnight. It showed that almost 2 hours had passed between when I'd last checked the time and when I woke up. I was sure I'd slept less than 4 hours, but the watch was off by almost 2. I don't know if it was just a glitch, but I double-checked the watch settings and battery. Everything was normal. I decided to pack up and get out early. Willow was still on edge, constantly scanning the woods and whining softly. On the drive back, I kept looking in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something following us in the trees, but the road was empty. I've gone back to Twin Pines a few times since, but I haven't stayed overnight again. The impressions in the dirt still haunt me, and sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear that faint thumping sound in my own backyard. I was flying a routine training mission out of Minden Regional Airport, late summer of 17. I'd just wrapped up my active duty a couple of years prior, and took a gig with a small private flight school. Nothing fancy, mostly training new pilots on basic maneuvers and navigation. That evening was clear, no clouds, good visibility, and I was up in a Cessna 172, doing touch and goes with a student near the edge of the controlled airspace. At about 8:30 p.m., my radio crackled unexpectedly. It wasn't the usual chatter from approach or tower. This was a direct transmission with an unusual urgency. The voice was calm but firm. "Hawkins, this is ground control. You are ordered to investigate an unidentified aerial object approximately 20 miles northeast. Elevation unknown. Proceed immediately." I double-checked the frequency, thought it was a drill or a mistake. "Ground control. Copy that. Can you clarify the target?" No response. Just static. The tone was weirdly clipped, like someone who didn't want to waste words. I wasn't about to ignore an order, even a vague one. I told my student to circle back to the runway, then took off solo, climbing to about 7,000 feet, heading northeast as instructed. The sky was still bright with twilight, but the sun was dipping below the horizon. I switched on my radar scope. Nothing, just the usual clutter and the faint blip of other small aircraft around the training area. I called ground control for updates, but the line was dead. No further info. About 10 minutes in, I noticed a faint glimmer off my left wingtip, just past the treetops far below. It didn't look like an airplane or a helicopter. No blinking navigation lights, no shape, just a pale, elongated light, almost like a stretched-out star. I banked left to get a better look. The light started to move, slow at first, just drifting through the darkening sky. Then it accelerated, fast. So fast it vanished from my sight in seconds. I checked the radar again. Nothing. No signal, no interference, nothing. I pulled the plane into a tighter turn, following the last known path of the light. Then the radio buzzed again, ground control's voice returning, this time calm but serious. "Object detected. Proceed with caution. Maintain visual contact if possible." I looked around, scanning the horizon. Suddenly, the light reappeared, but now it was a formation. 3 small lights, moving in perfect sync, about 300 feet apart. They changed direction abruptly, moving from a slow, deliberate eastward path to a sudden sharp left turn, something no normal aircraft could do. The acceleration was instant, without the gradual buildup you'd expect from any plane. I tried to keep up, but my little Cessna couldn't match the speed or agility. The objects disappeared in a blink, no contrails, no sound, no radar trace. The radio went silent again. I circled the area, searching desperately. Then the instruments started glitching. My altimeter jumped erratically. The compass spun briefly before settling. The GPS signal dropped out for a few seconds. I called for help, but the frequencies were dead or filled with static. I headed back toward Minden, unsettled. As I approached the airport, the control tower came back online, confused by my delayed return and odd altitude readings. After landing, I debriefed with the tower supervisor. No other aircraft reported seeing anything. Radar logs showed no unidentified contacts. Ground control denied issuing any orders. Later, I checked the radar logs myself. The entire event was a blank. No trace of the objects or the transmission. That night, I lay awake, trying to make sense of it. Was I chasing a drone? A weather balloon? Military test craft? Nothing matched what I saw. I kept thinking about those lights, their impossible moves, the silence, and the scrambled instruments. Whatever it was, it didn't behave like anything I knew. I still fly, but I haven't forgotten that night, and I'm not sure I ever will. I was rolling into the Ridgeview rest stop around 2 a.m. after a 12-hour haul from Boise to Salt Lake. The highway was dead quiet, except for my rig's steady hum and the occasional distant rumble from another truck. It'd been a long drive, and I was ready to stretch my legs and grab some coffee before the last leg. Ridgeview's one of those no-frills spots. A few weather-beaten picnic tables, a cracked asphalt lot, a flickering neon sign for the diner, and that big old billboard right at the edge of the lot. The billboard's been there forever, advertising something outdated. Last I saw it, some tire company with peeling letters. I parked my rig near the diner, shut down the engine, and pulled out my thermos. My dog, Juno, a scrappy black and white border collie mix, jumped down and immediately started sniffing around like she'd found a new treasure hunt. I leaned against the cab and took a long sip of coffee. The night was unusually warm for late October, and the air smelled faintly of smoke and pine. I wasn't in any hurry, so I walked over to the edge of the lot near the billboard, letting Juno lead the way. She's always been wary of that area. The tree line behind the billboard is thick and shadowy, even under the faint glow of the street lamps. Usually there's nothing there except the occasional raccoon or deer. But that night, something caught my eye. A shimmer near the base of the billboard. At first I thought it was just heat waves from the parking lot lights or a trick of my tired eyes, but the shimmer was oddly solid, like a silver veil hovering just a few feet above the ground. I blinked, and when my eyes cleared, it was gone. Juno froze, ears pricked, staring into the dark woods beyond the billboard. I scanned the area, feeling that odd tightening in my chest like something was off. The rest stop was still quiet, no cars pulling in or out. I walked closer to where the shimmer had been, and that's when I noticed the billboard itself. Part of its lower corner was warped and melted. The metal bent in a way that didn't make sense. The light from the street lamp flickered over it, revealing a jagged hole that looked scorched. I crouched down, running my fingers over the warped metal. It was warm, almost hot to the touch, but there was no smell of smoke, no burned grass or anything else, just the metal, strangely melted. Juno growled softly, low and uneasy. I backed up a step, eyes scanning the tree line again. The night was quiet, the stars pinpricks above, but the woods seemed darker than usual, like a shadow had settled there. I looked back at the lot. My rig was parked exactly where I left it, and the diner was still open, lights on, a few cars inside. I checked my watch. 2:15 a.m. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just tired, or the heat from the engine made me see things. But the melted billboard corner stayed with me. I walked back to the rig and let Juno jump in the cab. As I started the engine, I glanced back one more time at the billboard. For a moment, I thought I saw that silver shimmer again. Just the faintest flicker, like light caught on a bubble's surface. I blinked, and it was gone. I drove off slowly, the empty highway stretching out before me under the deep black sky. The weirdness stuck with me the whole drive home. I checked the news, but nothing about fires or accidents near Ridgeview. The next day, I called the rest stop's manager, a guy named Earl, to ask about the billboard. Earl sounded confused and said the billboard company had reported some electrical issues, but nothing about melted metal. He said they'd send someone to check it out. I never heard anything else. The melted section was still there when I passed by a few weeks later, but no one could explain it. And that silver shimmer, I never saw it again. Still, every time I drive past that billboard, I glance over, half expecting to catch that flicker again. I woke up to cold air hitting my face. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the kind of cold from a draft or breeze, but like the temperature around me had dropped suddenly. I was camping alone, up near Lake Shasta on the north side where there aren't any official sites. Just forest and steep hills and the occasional logging road that gets washed out after winter. I'd pitched my tent at the base of a slope maybe 100 yards from the shoreline. It was late September, clear and dry during the day, but it got chilly at night. I'd made a small fire, cooked a tin of chili, and crashed around 10. Slept hard. No drinks, no drugs, nothing weird. It was 3:14 a.m. when I sat up. I remember that exactly because my watch was still on my wrist, and I looked at it right away. The tent flap was wide open, zipper pulled halfway down. That stopped me cold. I always zip the tent fully. Always. Its habit keeps the bugs out, keeps the heat in. I don't leave it open, even when I get up to pee. At first, I thought maybe I'd unzipped it in my sleep. I've never done that before, but I guess anything's possible. But then I saw my gear. Everything electronic, my phone, GPS, headlamp, even my spare battery pack, was outside the tent, arranged in a straight line on the pine needles, about 6 feet out just beyond the lip of the rainfly, all lined up perfectly, with a few inches between each, like someone had taken the time to place them that way. I stared at them for a long time. None of them were turned on. My phone was powered off completely, which I never do. It stays in airplane mode when I'm out there. The GPS was off too. The headlamp, I'd left that inside, zipped into the tent's gear pocket, was sitting with the rest, bulb facing up. It didn't feel like a prank. No one else was out there. I hadn't seen a soul since I parked 2 days earlier and hiked in. The area is pretty remote, and I know the trails. If someone had come into my sight, I would have heard them. But I hadn't. There was no noise, no footprints around the tent. The pine needles looked undisturbed except for where I'd walked the night before. I checked my pockets. Wallet, knife, keys, all there. I should have packed up right then, but I didn't. I told myself maybe I'd had some kind of episode. Maybe I got up half asleep, moved my stuff, forgot. That made less and less sense the longer I sat there, but I held on to it. I gathered everything up and did a quick sweep around the tent. Nothing else seemed touched. I zipped the flap tight again, locked it with a little clip I keep for peace of mind, and laid back down. I didn't sleep after that, just listened. The forest was quiet, too quiet. No wind, no bugs, no rustling. It was like everything had shut off. Around 4:30, I finally started to drift, not asleep exactly, but that heavy, half-conscious kind of rest. I noticed it's a soft clicking sound, very faint, regular, like two pieces of plastic tapping together. It was coming from behind the tent on the uphill side. I froze. The clicks would go for a few seconds, stop, then start again. Always the same rhythm. Click, click, pause, click, click. I didn't unzip the tent. I just lay there, breathing slow, trying to decide if it was an animal or branches or something else. It went on for maybe 5 minutes, then stopped completely. I waited another 10, then sat up and turned on the headlamp. Dead. Battery drained. That thing was fully charged the day before, and I hadn't even used it yet. I tried my GPS next. Nothing. My phone powered on, but the screen was glitching, flickering and jumping between apps like it was being remotely accessed. Then it shut down on its own and wouldn't turn back on. Sunrise couldn't come fast enough. When it did, I got out of the tent and checked the slope behind me. There were marks in the dirt. Not footprints exactly, more like depressions spaced a few feet apart, leading in a zigzag down from the trees toward my tent and stopping just short of the rainfly. The dirt was dry and loose, but whatever had made those impressions had been heavy enough to leave an indent, then disappear. I walked out to the lake, trying to clear my head, and when I turned back toward the camp, I saw a shape in the trees, just standing there, still. It was far, maybe 50 yards, and mostly behind a trunk, but I could see part of a shoulder, maybe a head. I called out. No response. When I stepped toward it, it moved, quick and silent, deeper into the woods, gone in seconds. I didn't chase it. I packed everything up fast, shoved gear into my pack without folding or wrapping anything. I was on the trail within 10 minutes, hiked all the way back to the truck in under 4 hours. When I finally had signal again, my phone still wouldn't boot. I tried charging it from the car. Nothing. I had to get a new one a week later. The repair guy couldn't recover anything. Said the hardware was corrupted. Same with the GPS. Never powered on again. The headlamp was the only one that worked after a battery change, but the bulb flickered when I turned it on, like it was struggling to stay lit. I haven't camped solo since. I still go out sometimes, but always with friends. I still bring my gear, still zip the tent tight, but every now and then, I wake up in the dark and check to make sure everything's still inside. Still zipped, still there. I was parked on the shoulder of Highway 97, somewhere between Weed and Mount Shasta, late at night. Around 2:30 a.m., I guess. The kind of hour when the world outside your cab feels like it's holding its breath. I was doing my usual overnight run, hauling produce from California up to Oregon, trying to squeeze every hour I could before the morning rush. I pulled off for a break at this lonely stretch where the highway cuts through a narrow canyon. There wasn't a single other vehicle for miles, just my rig and the cold wind rolling down from the mountains. My dog, Rook, a scruffy border collie mix with ears that never quit twitching, was curled up on the passenger seat, half asleep. I had just cracked the door open a bit to get some fresh air because the cab gets stale after a few hours. The night was chilly, the kind that makes your breath fog up in the cab if you're not careful. I had my radio on, just faint noise in the background, the usual trucker chatter, mostly static and a few sleepy voices. Nothing interesting. I was scrolling through some playlists on my phone when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. Beyond the guardrail, maybe 15 feet from the front of my truck, there was a shape hovering just above the ground. At first, I thought it might be some kind of animal, like a deer or a coyote standing really still. But this was different. It didn't look solid, not exactly. More like a silhouette made of thick, swirling smoke, or maybe a heat haze. It wasn't casting any light, but I could see it clearly against the road's shoulder dirt and the dark trees behind it. The weirdest part was how it moved. It wasn't walking or running. It paced back and forth slowly, maybe 5 or 6 feet at a time, almost like it was stuck in a loop. No feet touching the ground, just this dark, blurred shape gliding silently above the gravel. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe I was tired or the cold was messing with me. But Rook lifted his head and stared right at it too, low growl rumbling in his throat. I reached for my phone to take a picture, but the screen went black for a second, then came back on with no signal. Weird, but not unheard of out here. I flicked the flashlight app on and off a couple times, trying to get a better look. The shape didn't seem to care. No light reflected off it, no shadow, just that odd form pacing in the dark. Then I noticed the noise, a deep, low thrum vibrating through the air, so faint at first I almost missed it. It wasn't coming through the speakers or my radio. It was physical. I could feel it pressing in my chest, like standing near a big engine running quietly. Rook's growl stopped, and he sat up straight, ears pricked, but he wasn't barking or whining, just tense, like he knew something was wrong but couldn't say what. I rolled up the window, locked the doors, and grabbed my flashlight. I told Rook to stay put, though he was already glued to the seat. I leaned out to see if I could catch a better look, shining the light toward the shape. It vanished instantly, like someone flipped a switch. Just the dark road and empty dirt. I blinked, heart pounding, and then it was back. Same shape, same slow pacing. No sound except that thrum, which seemed to get louder for a moment, then quieter again. It didn't seem interested in me exactly, but it was definitely aware I was there. I pulled my phone out again, checked the time, 2:42 a.m., and tried to call dispatch. No signal. The radio was static. Even the GPS was frozen, stuck on the last location before the signal died. It was like the whole world went dead in this one spot. I thought about getting out to walk around, see if I could find anything unusual on the shoulder or the trees, but something stopped me. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a warning I couldn't ignore. The air felt thicker, heavier. My chest ached from the thrum, and Rook's hackles were raised. I locked the doors tight, leaned back, and tried to keep my eyes on the spot where it was pacing. It kept the same slow back and forth rhythm, like it was stuck in some endless loop just beyond the guardrail, never moving closer, never leaving. After maybe 10 minutes, the thrum faded and the shape dissolved into the darkness like smoke blown away by the wind. No sound, no movement, just empty night. I sat there for a long time, just breathing and listening to the quiet return. My phone buzzed suddenly. A single text from dispatch saying my next stop was rescheduled. I didn't respond. I waited until dawn started to bleed into the sky, then finally rolled out onto the highway. Rook was quiet the whole drive, eyes flicking to the side mirrors and windows, but never panicked. I haven't told anyone in detail about what I saw, mostly because I don't really know how to explain it. It wasn't an animal or a person. It wasn't even light or shadow in any normal sense. I still think about that shape pacing just beyond my truck, that low thrum I could feel in my chest, and the way the world went silent and dead around me for those minutes. I don't know what it was or why it showed up there, but it was real, and it wasn't alone. I was driving home late one Friday night on this stretch of highway that runs through the foothills outside of Salem, Oregon. It's the kind of road that's mostly empty at night, just long, winding asphalt through trees and some open fields, and it's usually quiet, except for the occasional truck or late-night commuter like me. That night, it was clear and cool, early spring with a little chill in the air but no wind. I'd just gotten off a double shift at the diner where I work, and I was tired, looking forward to crashing once I got home. I was about halfway through the drive, maybe 10 miles out of town, when I noticed something weird up ahead. At first, it looked like a plane was hovering right over the highway. I don't mean flying low or anything normal. It was just there, completely still, hanging maybe 50 or 60 feet off the ground. No lights blinking, no sound, nothing. Just a dark shape against the clear night sky. I slowed down and blinked a few times, thinking maybe it was some kind of crane or a weird drone or even a helicopter, but the way it just hovered without any noise threw me off. There was no blinking light on it at all, which is strange for anything flying over a road. As I got closer, I saw it start to rotate slowly, like it was turning around an invisible axis. The shape was kind of triangular, but nothing I recognized from any aircraft I'd ever seen. The edges were smooth, and it didn't look like it had wings or rotors. Just this silent, dark mass that was moving slowly in place. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling a little uneasy. My headlights didn't seem to shine on it properly. The surface was almost absorbing the light. I kept watching it in my rearview mirror as I passed underneath. It didn't move forward or sideways, just rotated slowly, completely silent. I couldn't see any support, no cables, no poles, no engines. I wasn't the only one who saw it. A few weeks later, I found a local online forum where people were talking about the same thing. Drivers reported seeing this dark triangular shape hovering in the exact same spot along the highway, usually between 10:30 and midnight. Everyone described it the same way. Silent, no blinking lights, slow rotation, no visible means of support. A couple of people said their phones lost signal or their GPS acted weird around that stretch of road. I didn't notice that myself, but I didn't check either. I was just glad to get home. The next time I drove that way, I tried to leave later, hoping to see it again or at least figure out what it was. I got there around 11:15 p.m., and for a while, nothing, just the quiet road, the smell of pine, and my headlights cutting through the dark. Then, out of nowhere, the same dark shape appeared, hovering over the same spot, rotating slowly. I slowed down like last time, watching carefully, but I swear, my radio started to cut out, like static crackling in and out. The signal was spotty for a few seconds, then came back. The thing didn't move or make a sound. I thought about stopping and getting out of the car, but something made me stay put. I kept my eyes on it as I drove past again, but by the time I was 10 miles down the road, it was gone. I told a coworker about it, but he just laughed it off, said I was probably tired or imagining things. Another driver I talked to said they saw the same thing about a month earlier, but thought it was a weather balloon or a military test. That made me wonder if it was some secret government stuff, but I'd never seen a balloon just sit still and rotate like that, and no noise doesn't add up. The weirdest part was how calm it felt. Not like you'd expect, right? You'd think seeing something like that would freak you out, but I was just quiet. Like the thing didn't want me to be scared or anything. Just there, watching. After a few weeks, I stopped driving that route late at night. I figured it was better not to mess with whatever that was. One night, I was coming back from a friend's place, about 2 a.m., and I noticed headlights behind me. Thought it was someone just catching up, but as I glanced in my mirror, the car behind me slowed down too, then stopped on the shoulder. I pulled over to see if they needed help or something. The driver was a woman named Laura, a local from down the road. She told me she'd seen the same dark shape hovering over the highway that night and had been too creeped out to drive past it. We talked for a bit, and she said she felt like the thing was watching her too, like it was waiting. Neither of us could explain what it was or why it just sat there spinning slowly. The next morning, I went back out with my phone camera, hoping to catch something. But no matter how many times I passed that spot during the day, the shape never appeared. It was like it only showed up at night, in the dark. I never saw it again after that last sighting, but every time I drive that highway at night now, I glance up, half expecting to see it hovering silently, rotating, waiting. No flashing lights, no noise, just there, watching. I pulled off the highway at that rest area just before midnight. I'd been driving all day, running on fumes, and figured I'd get some shut-eye before making the last leg of the run. The place wasn't much. just some concrete slabs with a few scattered trucks, a dimly lit bathroom building, and a couple of vending machines. Nothing fancy. I parked my rig in the far corner, away from the others, and settled in for a few hours. I remember turning off the engine, grabbing my phone to check the time, 3:17 a.m. I set my alarm for 4 hours later, laid back, and closed my eyes. It wasn't long before I passed out. The first thing I noticed when I woke up was that everything felt off. Not in a I slept weird way, but like the whole world was just slightly wrong. I blinked against the pale light coming through the window. The sky outside wasn't dark like it should have been at 3 in the morning. It was this strange, dull color, sort of a muted greenish gray. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe I was still dreaming or had some kind of weird sleep paralysis. But no, the sky stayed that same weird color, and the air felt heavy and still. I glanced around the cab, trying to shake off the grogginess. That's when I noticed all my clocks, my phone, the little digital one on the dashboard, even the clock on my CB radio, were frozen. All of them stuck at exactly 3:17. That didn't make any sense. I'd just woken up. At least I thought I had. I checked my phone again. Dead screen. Tried to turn it on a couple times. Nothing. The battery was full when I went to sleep, so it shouldn't have died already. I started to feel uneasy, the kind of uneasy that crawls up your spine without making a sound. Then I heard it, a low, steady hum coming from underneath my trailer. It wasn't the usual sound of trucks idling or the highway traffic in the distance. This was different, smooth, continuous, and almost mechanical, but not in any way I could place. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable, like something was vibrating beneath me. I climbed out of the cab, squinting into the dim light outside. I checked under the trailer, but there was nothing there. No equipment, no animals, nothing that could explain the humming. I walked back to the cab and tried to start the engine. The key turned, the dashboard lights flickered, but the engine didn't catch. I tried again and again, but nothing. Then I looked up at the sky. The color wasn't changing, not getting darker like it should. It was stuck, like a broken picture hanging in place. I decided to head to the bathroom building, hoping maybe someone else was awake, or at least to get a better look at the sky away from my truck. As I walked, the humming grew quieter, almost fading into the background. When I reached the building, I noticed it was empty. No sounds from inside, no flicker of light in the windows. Even the vending machines were dead. No lights, no noises. I tried the door, it was unlocked but heavy. Inside, the air was stale and cold, and the fluorescent lights above were off. I found the restroom, looked in the mirror, and that's when the unease really settled in. My reflection looked the same, but the room felt hollow. Like the light wasn't really there, just pretending. I looked outside through the window. The sky stayed that same dull green-gray. And then I thought I saw something, a shadow, just out of the corner of my eye. I spun around, but there was nothing. No one else was there. I went back outside, and that's when I noticed my truck's dash clock again, still frozen at 3:17. I reached into my pocket for my phone once more. Dead. No signal, no sound. I sat on the concrete slab outside the bathroom building, trying to make sense of any of it. Then, without warning, the humming started up again, louder this time. Not beneath my trailer, but somewhere close. Maybe inside the field next to the rest area. I stood up and shone my flashlight toward the tall grass. The beam caught something moving, something smooth and dark, but it slipped behind a tree before I could see what it was. I called out, but my voice sounded distant, like it was being swallowed by the still night. The humming stopped again. I stayed where I was, not sure whether to head back to the truck or try to find someone. Anyone. I finally got up and walked back toward the cab. As I got closer, the humming started again, this time steady and low, but I could feel it vibrating through the ground. I sat in the cab, trying to start the engine again. It was no use. Then I noticed something else. The little green light on the dashboard that usually blinks when the ABS is active, normally off while parked, was blinking steadily in sync with the humming. I reached down and turned off the ignition completely. The light went out, the humming stopped, and the sky finally started to darken, fading back to normal night colors. I blinked a few times and everything was normal again. The clock on my phone turned back on, showing 3:19. The dash clock started moving again. I didn't stay long after that. I started the engine, and it fired up right away. I pulled out of the rest area without looking back. I told a couple of other truckers about it later, but no one had ever heard of anything like it happening there before. I don't know what that humming was or why the clock stopped at 3:17. I don't know why the sky was that weird color or what moved behind those trees. All I know is that night was different, and part of me still wonders if I really woke up at all. I woke up standing in my backyard, barefoot on the cold grass, staring up at the sky. The first thing I noticed was a ringing in my ears, like when you've been at a concert or your headphones blast too loud. It wasn't loud, just this steady, high-pitched tone that seemed to fill my head. I blinked a few times, trying to get my bearings, but everything felt foggy, like I'd just been pulled out of a deep sleep. I didn't remember going outside. The last thing I could recall was being in bed, probably around midnight. I wasn't even fully sure what time it was now. The sky was dark, but there was this strange, muted glow overhead, like the whole neighborhood was under a thick haze. I looked down at my feet. They were wet and a little muddy, and the grass was damp with dew. I live in a suburban neighborhood, so it's not like I have a forest or anything out back, just a small patch of grass and a wooden fence. The air was cool and smelled faintly of rain, even though the forecast didn't call for any. I had no idea how I'd gotten out here. I checked my hands and clothes for cuts or scratches, thinking maybe I'd fallen or something, but there was nothing. My shirt was wrinkled and untucked, and my jeans had some dirt smudges, but no real damage. I didn't feel hurt or out of breath, just kind of blank. The ringing didn't stop. It was still there, this constant high tone inside my head, and I noticed my heartbeat was a little louder than normal. I stepped toward the back door, and the cold grass squished under my feet. Every step felt strange, like I was moving through a dream. I opened the door and stepped inside. The ringing started to fade the moment I crossed the threshold. It wasn't instant, but slow, like a volume knob turning down. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a second, trying to shake off the weird feeling. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hands were steady but felt strange, like they didn't quite belong to me. I tried to remember what happened before I ended up outside, but my mind was blank, like a blank screen. I checked my phone for the time. It was 2:37 a.m. I had no messages, no missed calls. The screen was dim, but I noticed something odd. The battery had dropped from around 60% when I went to bed to just 12% now. I was pretty sure I hadn't used it at all during the night. I sat down at the kitchen table and tried to focus. The ringing was gone, but I felt a lingering pressure behind my eyes. I thought about trying to go back to bed, but part of me was restless, like I needed to figure out what had just happened. I decided to check the backyard again, but this time with shoes and a flashlight. I wanted to see if there was anything out there that could explain the ringing or how I got out. Outside, the grass looked normal, except for a small circle near the fence where the dew was missing. The ground was dry there, even though the rest of the lawn was wet. It wasn't muddy or crushed, just dry and oddly clean, like someone had wiped it down. I scanned the sky with my flashlight, but there was nothing except a thick layer of fog or haze that blurred the streetlights in the distance. No stars, no moon. That's when I noticed it, a faint glow beyond the fence line, off in the woods behind the houses. It was pale and steady, not like a flashlight or a car. Just this soft, unmoving light that didn't flicker or change. I thought maybe it was a street lamp or a neighbor's porch light, but it felt too far away and too low to be any of those. And I knew every house around here pretty well. The ringing came back for a moment, just a faint buzz, but it stopped again as soon as I turned my head away from the light. I stood there for a few minutes, watching it, feeling this weird mix of calm and unease. I wanted to call someone, but I wasn't sure what I'd say. Eventually, I went back inside. The moment I stepped through the door, the light outside blinked off, disappearing as quietly as it had come. The next day, I asked my neighbor if they had seen anything weird last night, but they said no. Everything was normal. The yard looked fine, and nothing unusual was reported. I checked the backyard again during daylight. That dry patch was still there. It looked like a perfect circle, maybe 10 feet across, with the grass stiff and pale. I've slept-walked a few times before, but never anything like this. Never out into the backyard in the middle of the night, with no memory of moving, and definitely never with ringing in my ears or strange lights hovering just beyond the fence. I haven't told many people about it, mostly because I don't really understand what happened. It wasn't scary like a nightmare, but it wasn't normal either. Sometimes when it's quiet and I'm lying in bed, I can still hear that faint ringing for a moment, like a reminder that whatever was out there is still just beyond my reach. I was out on my usual solo sailing trip, nothing fancy, just me, my boat, and a week of clear skies and open water. I've done this a few times a year for years now, mostly to get away from everything and just clear my head. This trip wasn't supposed to be any different. The first few days were exactly what I expected. Calm seas, the sound of waves against the hull, the occasional call of a gull. I'd wake early, check the weather, adjust my sails, and spend hours just watching the horizon. There's something about being out there, away from land, that makes everything else feel distant, peaceful, even. On the fourth evening, just after sunset, I was sitting on the deck watching the last light fade. The sky was a deep blue, stars just starting to peek through. The ocean was calm, almost glassy, reflecting the colors of the sky. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was some kind of debris floating on the water. A piece of wreckage, maybe, or a container lost from a ship. It was about 100 meters off the starboard bow, sitting right on the surface of the water. What caught my eye was that it was perfectly round and shiny, like polished metal, and it wasn't moving with the waves. I squinted and adjusted my binoculars. It looked like a disc, flat and smooth, maybe 8 or 10 feet across. There were no markings, no rust, no signs of wear, just clean, reflective metal. I didn't hear anything. No engine noise, no buzzing or humming, just the quiet slap of water against my boat. I've seen a lot of weird stuff at sea, driftwood that looks like faces, strange floating nets, seals popping up unexpectedly, but nothing like this. It wasn't drifting or bobbing. It seemed to be hovering, like it was floating just above the water. I blinked and looked away for a second, then looked back. The disc had tilted a little, just a subtle lean, maybe 10 degrees. Not like it was tipping or sinking, more like it was adjusting its angle, shifting gently. Then, without a sound or splash, it disappeared. Not sunk or submerged like something dropping under the surface, but vanished entirely. The water around it didn't ripple or bubble, nothing moved out of place. One moment it was there, the next it wasn't. I scanned the spot with the binoculars, but the disc was gone. I circled the boat slowly, eyes peeled, but there was no sign of it anywhere. Just open water stretching out in every direction. I sat there for a while, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. It wasn't a boat, it wasn't debris, and it definitely wasn't something natural, yet there was no noise, no disturbance, no evidence it had just disappeared. The rest of the night was quiet, but uneasy. I kept glancing toward where it had been, half expecting to see it come back or some other sign. I checked the radio, no chatter, no reports from nearby vessels. The sky stayed clear, the stars steady. The next day I told a few fishermen when I stopped in at a small harbor. They gave me strange looks. One said maybe it was some kind of drone or experimental craft, but none of the others had heard anything about something like that in the area. Another thought I might have been seeing things. I wasn't hallucinating. I'm used to long hours alone, and I know when my mind's playing tricks. This was real. That night, while anchored near the coast, I kept replaying the moment over and over. The stillness, the silence, that impossible smooth disc just sitting there, untouched by waves or wind. I don't know what it was or why it was there. It didn't make a sound, didn't try to communicate, and didn't do anything that felt hostile or threatening. It just existed for a moment, then vanished like a whisper. When I got back home, I checked the weather, maritime reports, anything that might explain a floating metal disc appearing and disappearing in the middle of the ocean. Nothing. I still think about it when I'm out on the water now, not with fear or excitement, but with a quiet confusion, like I saw something that's not supposed to be there and still can't wrap my head around it. My girlfriend and I were camping out near the Mojave, about 20 miles off the main highway. It was early April, not too hot during the day and chilly at night, but manageable. We'd camped before, mostly up north, but this was our first desert trip. The plan was to hike a little, stargaze, and just get out of cell service for a while. We drove my 4Runner down an old service road that cut through BLM land. No signage, no fences, just open land and low scrub. We didn't see another soul after leaving the pavement. Around dusk, we found a flat spot backed up to a rock formation. Good windbreak, solid ground not too far from where we parked. We set up the tent, rolled out the sleeping bags, ate some jerky and canned beans, the usual. No fire. We'd brought a camp stove but didn't use it that night. Just ate cold and watched the stars come out. It was crazy clear. I don't think I've ever seen the sky like that before. We laid there outside the tent for a while, just watching. Planes every now and then, satellites. Everything was normal. We turned in around 10 or 11. No animals, no wind, no noise at all, really. It got cold fast, but we brought good sleeping bags. I remember hearing one coyote far off before I fell asleep, but that was it. At some point during the night, I woke up. No noise woke me. I just opened my eyes. I was on my back, and I could see that the zipper on our tent door was open at the top, like 4 or 5 inches down from the peak. We'd closed it all the way before sleeping, I was sure of that. It was too cold not to. I sat up and looked around. My girlfriend was still asleep next to me, breathing steady. Nothing inside the tent looked disturbed. No bugs, no rustling, nothing missing. I didn't hear anything outside, but I still felt, I don't know, exposed. I leaned forward and zipped the door fully shut again, slow so I wouldn't wake her. Then I just sat there, listening. Not scared exactly, but alert. I stayed up maybe 20 minutes. There was nothing. No wind, no sounds, just that kind of dead silence you only get way out in places like that. Eventually, I laid back down and closed my eyes, but I don't think I really slept after that. When the sun came up, I was already awake. My girlfriend stirred next to me and asked if I'd unzipped the tent during the night. I told her no at first, then said, yeah. I had, because I saw it was open and zipped it back up. She looked at me funny, like maybe I was messing with her, but I wasn't. We stepped out of the tent to start making breakfast, and that's when we both stopped. Right in front of our tent, someone, or something, had taken the bundle of firewood we'd brought. Just a few sticks, maybe 8 or 10 pieces, in a mesh bag by the back tire, and arranged them in a perfect ring on the ground. Not stacked like for a fire. A flat, even ring. Every piece equidistant, maybe 3 feet across total, centered directly in front of our tent door. We hadn't touched the firewood. We hadn't planned on a fire. It hadn't been moved when we went to bed, I was sure of that, because I'd stepped over the bag on the way into the tent. The ground was sandy gravel. There weren't any boot prints or tire tracks, nothing around the ring either. Just the wood laid down like it had been measured out. We stood there for a while, not talking. It was bright out, fully daylight, but the silence felt wrong, like the whole place was holding its breath. Eventually, I walked around the perimeter of the camp. Nothing missing, nothing moved. Our cooler was untouched. Our packs were zipped. I looked for footprints or drag marks. Nothing. No animal sign either. The firewood itself was completely clean. No scratches, no soot, no bugs. Just dry sticks laid end to end in a circle. Not even a broken twig. I asked her again if she'd gotten up or heard anything. She hadn't. She's a light sleeper too. We both would have heard something approaching, but we didn't. After maybe 10 minutes of just standing there trying to figure it out, we packed up. No breakfast, no hike. We didn't talk much while tearing the tent down. Everything fit back into the 4Runner quick, and we got back to the road by 9 a.m. Later that afternoon, when we got back to town, I checked the firewood bag. It was empty. Not a single stick left inside. We never saw anyone else out there. No cars passed us on the way in or out. Nothing else ever came of it. Nothing followed us home. We never went back. I run almost every evening after work. Same loop through the edge of the neighborhood, down past the nature trail, and back along the golf course path. It's quiet, and by 7 or 8, there's hardly anyone out. I track everything on my smartwatch, pace, heart rate GPS, even audio logs sometimes. It's just a habit now. Helps me unwind. That night wasn't any different. I left the house around 8:15, just after sunset. The sky was still pink around the edges, but fading fast. It had rained earlier, so everything smelled damp and fresh. The air was cooler than usual. I remember because I thought I might need a light jacket and decided against it. About a mile in, I cut off the sidewalk and onto the trail like usual. It winds behind some houses, then dips into a narrow wooded area, just a strip of trees between the subdivisions. I've taken it 100 times. I know where every bump in the path is. I had music playing through my earbuds, but not loud. I like to hear what's around me, just in case. Footsteps, bikes, dogs. It was mostly quiet. A few birds still going. One car passed on the road to the east, but that was it. I remember checking my watch right before I hit the half-mile mark on the trail. Everything was normal. Heart rate in the 130s. Pace a little slower than usual, but not by much. I kept moving. Then, it was like I blinked and was somewhere else on the path. Not far, maybe 20 feet ahead of where I thought I'd been, but it felt wrong. Like I'd skipped something. I was mid-stride, but I had no memory of taking the steps that got me there. I stopped. I actually stood still for a second and looked around. Same trail, same trees, but something felt quiet. Too quiet. The music had cut out, just static in the buds. I pulled one out and listened. Static. Faint, like a radio not quite tuned in. I looked at my watch. It said I was paused, not stopped. Paused. That only happens when I hold down the side button, which I hadn't done. I tapped to resume and checked the runtime. It showed 34 minutes and change. That didn't make sense. I should have only been 20 minutes in, tops. I opened the run history and saw the pause, 12 minutes, 17 seconds. Right in the middle of the route. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I stood there longer than I probably should have, trying to figure out if I'd zoned out or something. Maybe I took a break and forgot, but I wasn't out of breath. I wasn't tired. There was no place on that stretch to sit or lean unless I'd wandered into the brush. I looked down at the ground around me. It was damp and undisturbed, no footprints, no sign I'd stood there for 12 minutes. Nothing weird, just pine needles and gravel. I kept going, slower now. I felt uneasy, like I'd walked into a room I wasn't supposed to be in. The trees seemed closer than they usually did. Taller, maybe, or just leaning more than I remembered. About a minute later, the static in my earbuds cut out. Total silence, like they'd died. But when I checked my phone, it still showed the music playing. I paused it and unpaused it. Nothing. I tried skipping tracks. Still nothing. I pulled both buds out and just listened. There were no bugs, no wind, no birds. It was dead quiet. That's when I realized I couldn't even hear the highway. And I'm always able to hear at least a hum from that direction. Even when the trees are thick, the sound carries. I felt watched. I know how that sounds, but that's exactly how it felt. Not like someone was behind me, more like something was very aware of me being there. I picked up the pace, no full sprint or anything, but enough that I felt like I was moving away from whatever that feeling was. When I finally came out the other end of the trail and hit the sidewalk again, the normal sounds came back all at once, like someone turned up the volume. Crickets, distant traffic, a plane overhead. I stopped right there under a streetlight and tried to replay what had just happened. I opened the audio recording on my phone. Don't always record, but for some reason I had that night. Probably something to do with testing a new app setting. It should have had the whole run. It was there. 44 minutes total. But from 22:03 to 34:20, it was nothing but static. Not silence, static. Low, glitchy hissing with occasional high-pitched pops. Like a broken speaker trying to process something it wasn't built to understand. I played it again. Same result. The GPS track on my app showed the same weird thing. A pause right in the middle of the woods. My little blue line just stops in place for over 12 minutes, then starts up again like nothing happened. I walked the rest of the way home, checking over my shoulder more times than I'd admit. I didn't feel right until I was back inside with the door locked. I backed up the audio file. I still have it. Every time I listen to it, I think maybe I'll hear something I missed. But it's just noise, not even rhythmic, just broken sound. The watch never glitched like that again. I even used the same route. But I haven't taken that trail at night since. Not alone. I was about 20 minutes into our usual loop when it happened. I walk my dog Beans every evening after work, same trail through the woods behind our neighborhood. It's a narrow dirt path that cuts through some thick trees, runs along a shallow creek, and then loops back near the cul-de-sac. I've done it so many times I could probably walk it blindfolded. That night felt the same as always. Quiet, cool, no one else around. Beans was acting normal at first. He's a mutt, small but confident, always tugging ahead, nose in the grass. It was just getting dark, maybe a little past 8, and the sun had dipped low behind the trees. I wasn't using a flashlight yet, just relying on the fading light. I had one earbud in, half listening to a podcast. We'd made it to the stretch near the creek when Beans stopped. Just froze in place. His ears were up, tail stiff, head tilted slightly toward the trees on the left. I pulled gently on the leash and said his name, but he didn't move. Didn't growl or bark, just stood there staring into the trees. That's when I heard the sound. It wasn't from the woods. It wasn't from anywhere, really. It came from inside my ears, both at the same time, like a pressure spike or an internal tone. Not a ring, not like tinnitus. More like a solid, deep tone that lasted maybe 3 seconds. It didn't fade in or out. It just was, and then it wasn't. I yanked the earbud out and looked around. No wind, no leaves moving. Everything had gone completely still. Even the birds had stopped. I remember thinking how loud the silence felt. Beans hadn't budged. Then I looked up. There was something above the trees, partly behind the clouds. It moved, but not like a bird or a plane. Just a slow, steady glide like it was floating, but it had direction. I only saw it for maybe 2 seconds before it disappeared into the low clouds. It was black, not shiny, not matte, just black. A void. The edges were hard to describe, sharp but uneven. Not a disc, not a triangle, more like a stretched, bent shape. Like a flattened letter Z, maybe. It didn't have any lights or markings, no sound, nothing that told my brain what it was. I kept staring at the sky, waiting for it to reappear, but it didn't. The clouds swallowed it, and that was it. Beans started whining then. Quiet, low-pitched whines. His legs were stiff, and he was leaning slightly backward like he didn't want to be there anymore. I crouched down to pet him, and I could feel him shaking. Not violently, just a subtle tremble in his back legs and shoulders. I stood up and tugged the leash gently. Come on, let's go. But he wouldn't budge, not even an inch. I tried again, a little firmer this time, but he just sat down in the dirt. Not out of defiance. It felt more like fear. His eyes kept flicking upward and then toward the trees, the way dogs do when they're listening to something you can't hear. I looked around again. Still nothing moving. The trees were dead still. No wind, no rustle. It was like the world had paused. I stood there for maybe 2 minutes, trying to decide whether to pick him up or wait it out. He's not a heavy dog, but I didn't like the idea of walking through the woods with him squirming in my arms. Eventually, I knelt down next to him and just stayed quiet. My phone said it was 8:17. I remember checking because I wanted to know how long this whole thing would end up lasting. Around 8:20, something changed. I couldn't explain it, but the air felt different, like something had been lifted. The sound of crickets started back up again, and a breeze moved through the trees for the first time in a while. Not strong, just enough to rustle some branches. Beans stood up slowly, still tense, still quiet, but on his feet now. He didn't pull forward, but he let me guide him back the way we came. I didn't try to finish the loop. We went straight home, taking the path with the least tree cover. Back at the house, he went straight under the dining table and stayed there for over an hour. I sat on the couch, lights on, still holding the leash without realizing it. I kept thinking I should go back out and look again, maybe bring binoculars or at least try to take a photo, but something in me said not to, like it would be a mistake. I checked the weather app, no storms, no unusual cloud activity, looked at flight trackers too. There was a plane that had passed over our county earlier, but way higher up and heading west. Nothing low, nothing matching what I saw. The weirdest part came the next morning. I took Beans out for a walk before work. Just around the block this time, no woods. He was totally fine. Back to his usual self. But when we passed the entrance to the trail, he stopped and backed away. I tried to coax him, but he wouldn't go near it. I tried again the next evening. Same thing. He'd walk past the houses, sniff lawns, pee on bushes like always, but as soon as we got close to the trailhead, he'd pull back and look up at the trees like he expected something to be there. It's been a few weeks now. I still walk him, but we stick to sidewalks. He won't go near that trail, and honestly, I'm okay with that. I haven't seen the shape again, haven't heard the tone either, but I keep checking the sky when it gets quiet, just in case. I was 16, and it was one of those rare warm nights in late October here in rural Vermont. Not quite cold yet, but crisp enough that my jacket felt right. I'd grabbed my binoculars, nothing fancy, just a hand-me-down from my dad, and headed out behind my house. The backyard opens onto a small clearing surrounded by thick woods, and it's about as dark as you can get without leaving town. I wasn't out there for any reason besides boredom and a little curiosity. I'd gotten into stargazing recently, just because it was quiet and felt like something to do other than scroll on my phone all night. I'd learned a few constellations, and I liked trying to spot the satellites or whatever they were. The sky was clear, and the stars were bright, but I mostly just liked looking at random spots and seeing what I could make out through the binoculars. My dog, a scrappy mutt named Juno, was with me. She usually stuck close but had a habit of wandering off and barking at nothing, which I figured was just the usual forest sounds. Anyway, I was looking up near Orion's belt when I noticed this bright white dot. Not a satellite, not blinking like an airplane, just steady. It looked like a star, but it was lower than the others, closer to the treetops in the distance. I focused the binoculars on it, adjusting for the shake in my hands. That's when things got weird. The white dot split into 2 points of light. They drifted apart slowly, maybe 2 or 3 degrees of separation, and then after a few seconds they started moving back toward each other until they merged again into a single point. The whole thing took maybe 15 seconds. It didn't flicker or change color. It was just like the star itself had decided to split in two, then put itself back together. I lowered the binoculars and blinked, thinking maybe my eyes were messing with me. Juno looked up from sniffing some leaves, her ears perked like she sensed something off too. The backyard was quiet except for the usual rustling in the woods. I raised the binoculars again, but the light was gone. Not just moved, but completely gone. The spot where it had been was just empty sky like it never existed. I checked the area around it, scanning up and down, left and right, but no sign of it anywhere. I stayed out there for a while, just staring up, waiting to see if it would come back or if something else would happen. But the sky was normal, no other weird lights, no changes, just a bunch of regular stars doing what stars do. The next day, I told my sister Morgan about it. She's 2 years older and skeptical about anything strange, so she said I probably just saw a satellite or some kind of optical illusion. I thought that might be right at first, but I kept thinking about how solid and clear the split was. Satellites don't do that. I watch a lot of night sky stuff online. Later that week, I tried to find the exact spot in the sky again with the binoculars. Nothing. I couldn't find the star or whatever it was. I asked my parents if they noticed anything strange out at night, but they hadn't. Just the usual sounds of the woods. There was another thing that night, though. After the light disappeared, I thought I heard something in the trees, like a soft rustle, but not like wind, more like footsteps or something moving slowly through the brush. I called out to Juno, but she stayed still, staring off toward the tree line, her body tense. I didn't hear anything else, and after a minute, it went quiet again. It wasn't like the usual night sounds out here, the owls, the crickets, the distant dogs barking, but a different kind of silence, like something stopped paying attention. I've spent a lot of nights outside since then, looking up, but I haven't seen that star again, or anything like it. Juno still sometimes freezes and stares into the woods like she did that night, but nothing ever shows. I don't know what I saw. It wasn't a plane, not a drone, not a satellite. The way it moved was wrong for anything I'm familiar with. The woods around here are full of hunters and hikers, and we get occasional small planes flying over, but none of them do that. I guess that's why it sticks with me. Not because it scared me or made me feel like I was in a movie, but because it didn't fit. Just a white star splitting into two and then vanishing. Sometimes I wonder if anyone else saw it. I woke up that morning because Rufus, my old lab, was pawing at the bedroom door, whining like something was wrong. I figured he probably needed to go out, so I got up, grabbed my slippers, and headed downstairs. It was early May in Vermont, still cool outside, but bright with that kind of fresh spring sunlight that feels new, even if you've seen it 100 times. I let Rufus out the back door first, and when I stepped onto the porch, I saw it right away. The garden. It's a small patch, mostly tomatoes, basil, a couple of pepper plants, and some sunflowers I'd been growing just for the hell of it. Usually the plants are kind of scattered, facing all sorts of directions, just wherever they grew or turned naturally toward the sun. But that morning, every single one of them was turned the exact same way. They all leaned, almost unnaturally, like they'd been pushed or trained overnight, facing toward the woods behind the house. It was weird because I hadn't been out there after dark, and no one else lives close enough to mess with my garden. The fence is old but sturdy, and even if some animal had gone through, I don't see how it would cause the plants to line up like that. Rufus was sniffing around, clearly confused, but didn't bark or act scared. Just kept nosing the plants. I went around the garden, bending down to check the stems and leaves. Nothing looked broken or trampled. The soil was undisturbed. It was like the plants just turned. I thought maybe it was the wind. Sometimes storms will push plants over, but the night had been calm. No rain, no strong gusts, just that quiet kind of stillness you get before dawn. I shrugged it off, went inside to make coffee, still thinking about the plants. I spent the morning in and out of the yard, half expecting the plants to start turning back their way as the sun moved, but they stayed facing the woods. I called my friend Irene around noon, hoping she might have some rational explanation. She's a botanist and used to work at the university's greenhouse. I described it, and she said she'd never heard of plants just turning like that without some obvious cause, like light direction, damage, or a touch stimulus. I mean, they respond to light, right? Maybe the sun was reflecting weird off something, or there's a new growth hormone in the soil, she said, but even she sounded skeptical. That night, I stayed up late, watching from the kitchen window. Rufus was curled on the rug, half asleep. The moon was full and bright, casting long shadows through the backyard. Around 2 a.m., I saw something odd. A faint light flickered through the trees, a dull glow, not like a flashlight or car headlights. It hovered low, just above the treetops, barely visible behind the thick branches. It wasn't steady, more like a pulse or a shimmer. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside, Rufus right behind me. The light disappeared before I could get close, but I noticed something else. The plants, again, seemed to lean a little more toward the woods, almost as if reacting to that glow. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the porch, watching, but nothing else happened. Over the next few days, I kept waking up to find the plants more and more aligned. The sunflowers had their big heads all facing the same direction, and even the tomato plants, which usually sprawl all over, seemed to be pointing as if they were looking for something I couldn't see. Rufus started acting weird too, sometimes growling low when he was outside, sometimes staring off into the woods like there was someone there. But every time I looked, it was just trees. I tried to ask the neighbors if they'd noticed anything strange, but no one seemed to care or had seen anything unusual. One afternoon, I was out in the garden when I noticed the soil looked different, near the edge closest to the woods. It was darker, almost damp, but the last rain was a week ago. I dug a little with my hands and found the dirt was loose, like someone or something had been digging around. I wasn't planning to stick around to investigate more, but Rufus was barking suddenly, ears flat, eyes locked on the tree line. I looked that way and caught a glimpse of something moving. A shadow, maybe, or a shape slipping between the trunks. I called Rufus and hurried inside. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from Irene. She said she'd been researching strange plant behavior, and something came up about plants responding to low-frequency electromagnetic fields. She wondered if something underground or nearby could be causing it. I didn't know what to think. The whole thing was just too strange. A few nights later, I woke up around 3 a.m. again and noticed the house lights flickering. The power cut out for a few seconds, then came back on. Rufus jumped up, alert as ever. When I looked out the window, the plants seemed to sway, even though the air was still. That's when I saw it. Again, just a flicker of light from the woods. This time it was closer, a pale blue-green glow moving slowly among the trees just beyond the fence line. I grabbed a flashlight and went out, Rufus growling and tugging at his leash. But as I stepped off the porch, the light vanished. The plants, though, they were all turned toward where the light had been, like they'd been watching. I spent the next week trying to document it, taking pictures, videos, notes, but the images never showed the light, only the plants. Eventually, the weirdness stopped. The plants slowly relaxed, turning back toward the sun, growing normally again. Rufus calmed down too. I don't know what was out there or why the garden acted like that, but every now and then when the wind is dead calm and the moon is bright, I catch myself staring at the trees, wondering if it's watching back. I was hiking alone one night, out in the mountains where the sky is supposed to be really clear. I'd picked a trail I hadn't tried before just to get some distance from the usual weekend crowds. It was around midnight when I stopped at a little clearing to catch my breath, looking up. The stars were bright, way more than I was used to seeing from the city. I leaned back against a tree and just stared up at the sky for a while. I'm no astronomer or anything, but I'd always liked watching the constellations, Orion, the Big Dipper, that kind of stuff. That night, the sky felt weird, but not in a dramatic way, just off, like something was subtly wrong. At first, I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. The stars above me, the whole sky, seemed to shift a little bit. Not like moving fast or anything, but like the whole pattern was sliding sideways very slowly. It wasn't like the Earth turning. I know enough about that. It felt like the stars themselves were shifting. I blinked, expecting the effect to stop, or at least change, but when I opened my eyes again, the stars had snapped right back into their usual spots. I rubbed my eyes and looked up again, and the same slow shift started. It was subtle, but definitely there. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes, blinking a bunch and watching. Every time I blinked, the stars realigned perfectly. Every time I opened my eyes, they'd start drifting out of place again, slowly sliding to the side like the sky was warped or bent just for me. It felt like the world itself was breathing, only it wasn't the air or the trees, it was the stars. And somehow I was the only one who could see it. I started to feel kind of uneasy. The forest was silent except for some distant rustling, probably animals moving around. I kept looking around, half expecting to see someone watching me or something strange in the shadows, but nothing was there. I checked my phone for the time. Battery was low, but it showed 12:15. I tried to call my buddy who was supposed to meet me at the trailhead in a couple hours, but the signal was gone. That wasn't unusual out here, but it added to the weirdness. I packed up my stuff slowly, eyes still flicking back to the sky. The slow star shift happened a few more times as I got moving, always disappearing when I blinked, always creeping back when I looked. As I walked back down the trail, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. I'd stop and listen, but no footsteps or voices, just the trees and the night. Every time I looked over my shoulder, the shadows seemed to flicker oddly, like they weren't quite right. The stars kept drifting and snapping back as I hurried down, and I found myself blinking more than usual, almost unwillingly. I couldn't tell if it was just fatigue or if something was messing with my vision. After about an hour, I reached a spot where the trees thinned out and I could see the lights of a town far below. That was normal, comforting. The stars seemed to stop shifting once I was closer to the lights, or maybe I just stopped noticing it. I wasn't sure. When I got back to my car, the normal night sounds of the highway and distant cars felt loud. I checked the sky one last time before I got in. The stars were where they were supposed to be. I drove home feeling off, like I'd seen something I shouldn't have, but I couldn't say what. I've looked up at the stars a lot since then, but never saw anything like that again. Sometimes, when I'm alone outside at night, I think I catch a glimpse of that slow shift again, but I'm not sure if it's real or just my mind playing tricks. It was mid-March, right around the tail end of my contract. I'd been working up near Tromsø, helping with some equipment maintenance at a weather outpost. The job wrapped early, and I had 3 days before my flight home. A buddy of mine who'd already flown back let me borrow his snowmobile and gear so I could get one last trip in. I figured I'd ride out to this little cabin we all used sometimes, tucked in way off the road, middle of nowhere. No service, no power, just silence and snow and sky. I left that morning around 10, skies totally clear, barely any wind. It was colder than usual, but not by much, maybe minus 15 degrees Celsius or so. Pretty normal for that time of year. I packed light, mostly just food, extra gas, and the usual emergency gear. The ride out was uneventful, took about 2.5 hours. I didn't see another person the whole way. The weird part didn't happen until later that afternoon. I was out on the lake behind the cabin, just doing lazy laps, messing around. That lake's big, maybe 3 or 4 kilometers across, and this time of year it's flat as a table, solid ice, completely untouched. No footprints, no tracks, just white all the way out to the tree line. It was around 4 when I noticed it, just a dark spot in the middle of all that white. From a distance it looked like a shadow, or like someone had spilled fuel or oil. I figured maybe it was a hole in the ice from a hunter or researcher. But when I got closer, it wasn't a hole at all. It was a circle, a perfect circle, probably 20 feet across, where all the snow and ice had melted down to bare ground. Not cracked or broken, gone, like someone had peeled it off clean. There was steam rising from the edges, like it had just happened. And in the center, the ground wasn't muddy or frozen. It was dry, like summer dry. I parked maybe 30 feet from the edge and walked up to it, and I could feel the temperature change as I got closer. The air felt warmer near the edge, just slightly, like a heated bathroom after a shower. My goggles fogged a little. I didn't step into the circle. I just stood there looking at it. The line where the snow stopped was razor sharp, not melted gradually, just cut, like with a laser. There were no footprints, no tracks leading in or out. No animal signs either, which is unusual. Even in winter, you'll see fox trails or ptarmigan prints. There was nothing. I crouched and touched the edge where the snow ended. It was wet, and the ground underneath was warm. Not hot, just warm and noticed through my glove. I remember rubbing a little of the dirt between my fingers. It was almost sandy, which didn't make sense for where we were. That area was all hard-packed tundra under the ice. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, not really knowing what I was looking at, and then I heard something behind me, just a soft crack in the ice. Not loud, but sharp, like someone stepping on thin ice. I turned fast, thinking maybe someone else had come out there without me hearing their sled, but no one was there, just empty lake. I looked around for a while, walked a slow circle, checked behind my snowmobile. Nothing. No wind, no movement, no sound. I didn't hear that crack again. I backed off and got on the snowmobile. I was about to head back to the cabin, but something made me look back once more. I was maybe 50 feet out by then, and I saw, just for a second, what looked like a shimmer over the circle, like heat rising off pavement. It was faint and it didn't last, but I know I saw it. Back at the cabin, I tried to radio the main station just out of habit, but I couldn't get through. That wasn't unusual. Reception out there was crap anyway. Still, I felt uneasy in a way I couldn't explain. I stayed inside the rest of the night and didn't light the wood stove. Didn't want to make a signal, I guess. At around 1 in the morning, I stepped outside to use the bathroom and saw a single light way out over the lake. It wasn't moving, just hovering, maybe 30 or 40 feet off the ice, directly above where that circle had been. I stood there watching it for I don't know how long. It was red, not flashing, not bright, just solid and dull, like a brake light far away in fog. After a while, it just blinked out. Gone. No sound. Nothing left behind. I didn't sleep that night. When I went out the next morning, the circle was still there, but the ground inside it was frozen again. Not snowy, still bare, but the warmth was gone. No steam, no shimmer. The line around it had softened a little, like the snow had tried to creep back in. I left before noon. Didn't stop. Didn't eat. Rode straight back to the main road, then caught the train south a day early. I didn't tell anyone. Not really. I mentioned something to one of the other guys on the crew during the trip back to Oslo, just kind of joked about a weird hot spring or something, but he didn't ask questions. 2 months later, I tried to look it up, satellite images, weather anomalies, anything. There was nothing. No records of anything unusual in that area at all. I don't know what it was. I was out hiking one afternoon on a trail I'd been on plenty of times before. Nothing fancy, just a loop through some woods I knew pretty well, a spot I'd been going to for years when I needed to clear my head. I usually kept it simple: my backpack, a couple snacks, my phone, and my watch. Both of those are pretty standard gear for me, since I like to keep track of time and have some way to call help if I need it. That day, I started my hike around noon, maybe a little after. The weather was clear, sun shining but not too hot. I was moving at my usual pace, taking my time. Nothing felt out of place. The trail looked the same: the trees, the rocks, the little creek I crossed twice. I wasn't in any rush. I'd done this loop dozens of times and had it memorized. But somewhere about halfway through, I noticed something weird. It was subtle at first. I glanced at my watch and thought it was strange how quiet everything had gotten. The birds stopped chirping. The usual background noise from insects was missing. I figured maybe it was just a lull, but it felt like the whole forest had gone still, like it was holding its breath. I kept walking, but the silence stayed. No rustling leaves, no wind through the branches, just this thick, heavy quiet. That started making me uneasy. I looked up at the sky and saw something I didn't expect: this weird glow. It was like the sky itself had brightened, but it wasn't the sun. The light was too steady, too white and bright, almost like a spotlight shining through the trees. I stopped and stared for a few seconds, trying to figure out what it was. The light was coming from somewhere above, but I couldn't see anything. No clouds, no airplane, nothing that would explain it. It just glowed through the branches, washing everything in this pale, unnatural light. Then everything around me felt off, like time slowed down or maybe stopped. I swear I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. After that, I don't remember much for a while. I don't know how long I stood there or how I got from that spot to the edge of the trail. When I finally snapped out of it, the sun was already low, almost setting, and the forest was back to normal. Birds were singing again, and there was a breeze moving the leaves. I looked down at my watch, and it was frozen. The hands hadn't moved since the moment the sky lit up. My phone was dead, but it wasn't just out of battery, it was like it had shut off completely at the same time. I tried turning it back on, but it wouldn't respond. I checked my surroundings, but the trail felt unfamiliar. I was on the right path, but something was wrong. The trees looked the same, but the way the light fell through the branches was different, like the sun had shifted hours ahead, and I had somehow lost time. I started walking faster, feeling this growing anxiety I couldn't explain. I kept checking my watch and phone, hoping either one would start working again, but no luck. When I finally got back to my car, the clock on the dashboard confirmed what I suspected. I'd lost about 4 hours. No idea where that time went. I wasn't tired or anything, just disoriented. The weirdest part is that no one else I talked to noticed anything strange that day. No news about unusual lights or power outages, nothing. I've gone back to that trail a few times since, but I haven't seen or felt anything like that glow again. Still, sometimes when I'm out there, I get this creeping feeling like I'm being watched, like something is just beyond the trees, waiting. And my watch and phone? They never worked right after that day. The watch stopped keeping time accurately, and my phone still glitches sometimes, like it's trying to remember something it can't.